with Sam Seder. It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, July 13th, 2017. My name is Sam Seder. This is the four-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Assistant Professor of Sociology at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Michael McCarthy. On dismantling solidarity, capitalist politics, and American pensions since the New Deal. Meanwhile, Republicans and McConnell unveil Republicare 2.0. Department of Justice ignores a court order. CBO says Trump's budget lacks math.
What?
Meanwhile, Trump's lawyers don't trust little Kushner. And they were asked about their drinking problem. Don't know what that was about. Dreamers are in jeopardy. DACA under assault by nearly a dozen Republican-controlled states. And BBC reports the Chinese have successfully teleported something to America's orbit. Meanwhile, Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos is making faked date rape a high priority. And Christopher Wray primed to be the next FBI chief, but the question is he honestly loyal? All that and more.
Loyalty. See what I'm saying?
I like my loyalty to be honestly loyal.
Not dishonest loyalty. That's what I do. But I want the other kind.
Folks, welcome to the program. I am again at a remote location, but we do have video today, I believe. Every day I find a new tech difficulty, but then I solve a different problem. So it's a constantly moving, shape-shifting, metamorphizing target. Just a couple of reminders. Oh, first off, I should tell you that the Michael Brooks Show, which doesn't exist yet, but is about to exist, is in what we call pre-production, is now up over 205 supporters on Patreon. So head over to patreon.com/ and you can work this out with me, the T Michael M Brooks B Show S. So it's patreon.com/TMBS.
And thanks, everybody.
Trademark BS, if you will, is a good way to remember that.
Just too much of it.
Also, just a reminder, this show relies on your membership to exist and to continue to grow. We're spawning new things all the time. Our studios and our producers are able to produce more stuff. We're not only Michael's show coming out of this office, not this office, that office that he's in right now, but we'll have another show that will be coming out of that office. Not necessarily, we have different hands in any of these. The Majority Report empire has broad tentacles, and sometimes those tentacles are scaly and small, and like pointy, and sometimes they're bigger and more embracing. But nevertheless,
Scaly
they're
and
tentacles.
small and pointy. Jesus.
Well, I'm just saying. There are multiple different types of testicles. That's not a controversial statement.
Multiple
so
kind
it's-
of what?
Tentacles.
Okay. Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is unnerving. I'm such a creature of habit that when I'm in like a new environment doing this, I get thrown off easily, and I'm not used to different things where they are.
Where's the new board? Testicles.
All right. We are waiting for, I don't know is that me? That can't be me. That has to be you guys, right?
What?
What are we waiting for?
We are waiting for, well, actually, I think it's just been unveiled, the Republican plan. But in the meantime, just to give you a heads up, Rand Paul, and my understanding is, and I have not seen the details of the plan, my understanding is supposedly the conservatives have won over the day, but I'm not convinced about that. The details I'm seeing now are that $70 billion in additional funds would be used to help reduce premiums. Okay, so we talked about this, right? We knew there was a $200 billion slush fund. They're going to help reduce premiums. Now, we don't know how long that's going to be, but they increased the subsidies, essentially. It would convert Medicaid from an open-ended entitlement to a system of fixed payments to states. All right, so this is really important for people to understand because you hear this a lot. They're turning it into a block grant. Now, as it is now, it is what is known as an economic stabilizer in some respects, right? Sort of like food stamps. Food stamps has a threshold. And if your income drops and your assets drop below a certain threshold, you become eligible for food stamps. So in the event of a major financial crisis, let's say, I know that rarely happens, but it does happen, and more people drop below there, food stamps will automatically expand to help those people. Now, and we see cuts to it, but that's the theory behind it. Medicaid is the same way. If you're eligible for Medicaid, you will get covered and you will get those benefits. However, when they change it to block granting, what they're doing is they're saying to each state, okay, you have a limited amount of funds. Do with it as you may. If you end up having more people living in poverty, more children living in poverty, more elderly going into nursing homes, having spent all their assets because we also are screwing them on the Social Security side and 401ks don't work. In fact, we're going to have an entire interview about it now. But 60% of elderly in nursing homes are being paid for by Medicaid. If you end up having more, this is what the federal government says to the states, if you end up having more people in the future than you have now who have those needs, you are SOL. Crap out of luck. COL. And block granting is a way of basically preventing the program for addressing what's going on for population growth, for any financial hardships that may befell people. It's a way of cutting Medicaid and changing it from what it is fundamentally, a guarantee of some form of ability to pay for some health care. And it would undercut that. There is also, it appears that Ted Cruz's proposal is going to be adopted. And this is Rand Paul showed up on Fox and Friends today to discuss the details of the bill. But the understand that the Cruz provision, there's another way of saying this. It's called adverse selection. But let's let Rand Paul make his pitch first.
think we can offer something better than Obamacare. What I've been offering is there's 27 million people that were left behind by Obamacare who have no insurance currently. What I've been offering is a plan that would offer insurance to all of them at a cheaper price. Let every individual in this country, plumbers, pest control, carpenters, welders, let them join together in associations so they can get group insurance at a cheaper price. But you have to believe in freedom. You have to believe that leaving people alone, that the marketplace will bring the prices down.
Yeah, okay. So the freedom thing, what the freedom is, it's the freedom. In fact, the consumer freedom option that Ted Cruz allows insurers to sell plans that are compliant with the Affordable Care Act, but then ones that are not compliant with the Affordable Care Act. So in other words, you can sell the cars with all the safety features, but you'll also get the opportunity to sell the car that occasionally blows up when it gets hit from behind. I mean, this is the ultimate libertarian wet dream, right? I mean, this is the caller who called in and said, you know, why shouldn't Ford be able to sell the Pinto that explodes? If they tell people that it'll explode, some people will still want to buy it because it'll be offered at a lower price. And that's basically what they're doing. They're offering the exploding Ford Pintos, but these are all, incidentally, these are all guaranteed to explode if you need them. And what this is known, is adverse selection, or this is going to create a situation where we have adverse selection. So, for people who have reason to believe that, at least in the short term, they're not going to need robust health insurance that actually functions the way it should, they will buy the non-compliant one. For people who have a reason to believe, and maybe they have pre-existing conditions, and maybe they have something that runs in their family, who knows? Maybe they're older. Maybe their jobs are more difficult, physically demanding. They will buy the legit health insurance. And what will happen is the risk pool for the legit health insurance will be much riskier for the insurer. And the risk pool, the pool of applicants, and the amount of risk for those in the non-compliant insurance will be a lot less riskier. So that'll be a cheaper plan because they don't have to pay out. And what will happen with the plan where you have people who have a higher risk of getting sick, that will become so incredibly expensive that most people who really need health insurance will not be able to get it. And we will return to the situation that we were before the Affordable Care Act, although probably worse because we're going to see some problems with the employer-based health insurance that nobody seems to be talking about. But we need to see the details. So that's what freedom will bring about. It is the freedom of people to be hoodwinked into buying insurance that won't be there when they need it. And it is the freedom for people to say, oh my gosh, the insurance I need is way too expensive for me. At least I have the choice to risk bankrupting my family as opposed to not the choice to bankrupt my family. And that's basically what freedom's going to get us. In the meantime, there was a time where freedom meant something very different. It was not about your freedom as a consumer or the freedom of a corporation to sell you whatever it wanted under any circumstance, relying on the asymmetry between what you understand about your insurance and what the company who's selling it to you knows about it. And but there was a time where freedom meant things like freedom from want, freedom from monopolies that limit your choices. I mean, freedom of choice is really about a dynamic. You don't have freedom of choice to not buy something if you don't have the money to buy it in the first place. And you don't have freedom of choice to walk away from health insurance that will basically make it impossible for you to do anything else in your life except for work to pay for that health insurance if your child is born with a pre-existing condition, if your child gets cancer, if your spouse gets cancer, if you get hit by a bus. So freedom means a very narrow thing for these conservatives and libertarians. It remains to be seen how this bill is going to be received, but there is a lot of pressure on Republicans to sign on to this bill, because the option is to go back to their constituents and say, hey, we couldn't pass the Republicare, so what we're doing now is we are working with the Democrats to shore up Obamacare. I mean, is there anything more treasonous a Republican could say to the Republican base than, I am working with Democrats to save Obamacare?
That would be like, I don't know, getting information from a sort of hostile foreign government for a campaign. Oh, wait, nope. Psych.
No, not even.
Not like that at all. That's totally fine.
That's fine.
That's
winning.
That's what you're supposed to do if you're a real man.
That's winning. I mean, honestly, like, I challenge anybody to come up with anything that would sound more treasonous. And I saw a recent poll, I think, that came out today that said 56% of Republicans want their electeds to negotiate to shore up Obamacare. Or I should say, yeah, I think maybe it was 56 Republicans, 56%. Which I find very hard to believe. But even if that's the case, it's the other 44% who come out and vote. And they're the ones who are going to primary you if you're a Republican. I mean, that's why I think there's just such an enormous amount of pressure to basically these moderates, Dean Heller, the rest of them, they're getting a crap sandwich and they're getting it rammed down their throats, Republican style. That's the way they like it, apparently.
You ready for something to get rammed down your throat, Dean? You ready for this? Open. I hope you have a good gag reflex and jaw flexibility because it's happening.
You're going to have 2 weeks. Hold your nose. That makes the taste sound a little bit better. It's going to be like like one of those, like on Survivor when they used to make them eat the maggots or whatever it was.
On the upside, you're personally going to be leading to a lot of human misery, and most people don't have that much of an impact in their lives. You can look in the mirror and say, hey, there's a family who can't afford their cancer treatment because of something I did.
You're going to be able to look at the 50% bankruptcy rate and say, I built that.
I did something in Washington.
Yeah. Do you want to be the one who prevented just generations of deprivation? Do you really want to be that guy in history? All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, an interview I did, I pre-taped it, what was it, the beginning of the week or the end of last week. Fascinating stuff. The history, you can see the way our society viewed pensions, and really interesting history of pensions in this country. And the trajectory is not great, folks. I don't want to be the spoiler alert. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, Michael McCarthy, assistant professor of sociology at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on his book, Dismantling Solidarity, Capitalist Politics, American Pensions Since the New Deal. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Michael McCarthy. He is a assistant professor of sociology at Marquette University and author of Dismantling Solidarity, Capitalist Politics and American Pensions since the New Deal. Mike, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, let's start with where we are, and your book is largely about how we got to where we are today with our pension system, and so let's just start with where we are, which is not a particularly great place relative to, I guess, pensions if you're looking at them from the perspective of providing some type of financial security for seniors.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, in terms of where we are, currently about half of all households with folks age 55 or older, basically folks that are getting ready to retire, have basically nothing saved for retirement at all. So about half of the folks that are on their way to retirement currently have nothing saved for retirement. So in terms of where we are, we're kind of facing a bit of a retirement crisis. Folks have Social Security that they can rely on, which most have been paying into throughout their working lives, but that replaces a small percentage of the earnings that they were making during their working lives. Most of that has to be kind of supplemented with other things. Oftentimes, a private pension plan, if people are lucky enough to have one. Only 40% of workers in the U.S. even have a pension plan at all, or just like personal savings or something. You know, maybe somebody has a rich uncle that gave them something. So there's a real sort of problem currently in the U.S. But this is kind of a problem that's, you know, it's not just U.S. specific. It's more and more countries are coming up against these sort of retirement issues. Where people just simply don't have enough saved.
All right, so we have, and this is, I mean, let's, you start your book essentially from around the New Deal, but let's just remind people prior to the New Deal where we were at. I mean, so, you know, the New Deal was a big leap forward in terms of providing that, but the story seems to be that ever since then, the trajectory of providing some type of financial security and just a fairly decent quality of life. We're not talking about jet setting around to Davos, but a fairly decent quality of life in retirement. The trajectory seems to be going in the wrong direction since the New Deal, but just briefly give us a sense of where we were before the New Deal.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, prior to the New Deal, there were sort of public retirement plans. Most of those plans were at the state level. The New Deal established the federal program, Social Security, the Social Security Act, which includes the retirement program. And there was a number of kind of union-run kind of mutual aid societies that existed prior to the Great Depression. Where sort of people in a community would get together, they'd pool their money, and they would sort of use that for things like insurance, but also for retirement programs. A lot of those went under because of the Great Depression, which was kind of something that caused a greater need for a sort of government intervention. So before the New Deal, there wasn't a robust public program that people could sort of rely on, and what the New Deal what the New Deal kind of gave us was this kind of moment of hope, this possibility of being free from want, you know, in our old age, was Roosevelt's. Roosevelt gave a big speech where he laid out these four freedoms, and one of them was freedom from want. It kind of offered that promise, but really, like you were just saying, since then we've kind of just incrementally moved away from that promise, more and more towards market mechanisms and the market in general for providing retirement, which is very risky, which is oftentimes underperforms government retirement plans. And we're moving towards now that sort of pre-New Deal period, where people are sort of have to sort of come up with the savings on their own, and it largely depends on how well they did in terms of the kinds of jobs they got, and how well the market is functioning when they retire.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the 2008 crisis, it really shows the kinds of this kind of situation that we're in. Basically, between 2007 2008, stocks plummet about 38%, and that just devastates retirement savings plans, both in the U.S. but in other countries as well. In the U.S. alone, 401ks and IRAs, individual retirement accounts, lost about $2.4 trillion in savings. And those 401ks they've recovered on average. They've recovered those losses since 2008, right? The stock market has rebounded, but
they've lost 10 years of projected growth during that time.
Exactly. So there's that. That's a very important fact. They've lost significant years of growth, which means that people are going to have to work longer to get the amount that they were expecting. And two, actually, that average is pretty misleading, because about 45% of people that are approaching retirement, in that 50 to 60 year old age range, have actually seen further losses in their 401ks since 2008. So there's a lot of our dependence basically on financial markets for retirement savings. It creates a very precarious system for people that are sort of thinking about having a stable life after work, and it puts a lot of risk onto individual workers to sort of to figure that out.
And let me just add one other data point. I mean, we can talk about people who have 401ks that shrunk over the course, obviously because of the volatility of the stock market. But we could add to that a lot of people had to pull out money out of the 401ks. They lost their jobs, so they don't have the ability to put money in. Plus, on top of that, we also know that 401ks as a sort of broad-based sociological experiment, maybe psychological experiment, people just don't fund them to the extent that they need to be funded to be effective in any way. So they have failed in terms of, broad-based, from a broad-based perspective in terms of providing the returns, but they've also failed to be an effective savings mechanism. And so, if you have a 401k, which a lot of people don't really have one that's even funded, like you say, it's been performing poorly. All right, so let's go. So since what I found interesting about your about the sort of the first era, I guess, following Social Security, in terms of the relationship between labor and capital, and particularly, in the context of unions versus management, that the union's strength was such that they were almost not weak enough and not strong enough to really have the impact that would be durable in some way. If that makes sense to you, I mean, it's obviously it's your story, but tell what happens after World War II. So we have the New Deal. We have Social Security, which is in many respects, and we've talked about in this program, lacking, particularly if you are a woman or a person of color, or in certain professions and whatnot. And I think around that time the Wagner-Murray-Dingle bill fails to expand Social Security, both in terms of who it covers and in terms of its benefits. But then what happens when people return from when we're in the post-World War II era?
Yeah, it's kind of a pivotal moment, because everything was really on the table, and you had labor unions at that time, a significant portion of them, especially the unions that were in the CIO, had a very social democratic outlook, and actually strongly preferred more robust public, not just retirement plans, but also public health care. Basically they were advocating single payer health care at that time. And what happened was that there was a very large push after World War II for collectively bargained private plans. And a number of unions were pushing for these plans, unions like the UAW under Walter Reuther, because they thought it had strategic value to kind of get employers to say, you know what, maybe it's better if we just kind of supported a more robust public plan, because that would kind of equalize the cost of our retirement plans to our competitors in the markets that we're in, right? If everybody got a sort of a base retirement that could sort of provide for a stable life after work, then employers wouldn't have to contribute as much into their own employee sort of retirement plans. So the UAW thought that employers were going to see this effort to kind of to create these collectively bargained plans, and it would shift them over to sort of being in favor of a more robust Social Security system, and that was just simply not the case. Employers were, I'd say, ideologically opposed to Social Security to such an extent that actually they were willing to incur greater costs in establishing private plans.
Well, I mean, this is
strange.
This is, this is not terribly different from the arguments that we've heard over the past 10 years about expanding healthcare coverage from the state, right? I mean, I remember maybe it was 10 years ago, we used to hear all the time, $3,200 of GM's car is because of healthcare and obligations for healthcare for their their former workers or something.
Exactly.
And so there was just such a concern about the New Deal and Social Security that we'd rather just take it on the chin, because it's obviously more expensive, right? I mean, for an employer to have to provide pension, even matching or even if it's not a one-to-one relationship as to what you would theoretically get, you got to put money into that account.
Yeah, no, that's no doubt about that. I mean, it should definitely be said though that employers, I mean, their strong preference at that time was to have neither. They didn't want expanded Social Security, nor did they want to establish private pension plans for their employees. Like they were, and so when unions made this push after World War II, employers strongly resisted. You had major strikes in auto, in steel, in mining, in a number of other industries. And while those strikes were pushing for higher wages, they were also pushing for fringe benefits.
And you make the argument that the strikes were not. I mean, the narrative that we understand is that the strikes showed the power of unions. However, because of the nature of the era, and I guess the challenge of Truman to what was the term that you used in the book?
Reconversion?
Yes, reconversion. Explain that dynamic, because it tells a slightly different story about the relative power between unions and management at that time. Yeah, I mean
it's pretty fascinating, because basically what was happening was that policymakers in the Truman administration, but this was true of Republican policymakers as well. If you look at the congressional debates, policymakers were very concerned about the economy after the war. Like once the war was coming to a close, they were very concerned about capturing those new markets in war-torn Europe and Japan. And also about the state of labor management relations in the U.S. Now, during the war, there was a number of institutions like the War Labor Board. There was government policy that was like directly regulating unions and management, so that there was a no strike pledge that happened during World War II, where unions basically said, "Look, we're going to put aside what we're doing. This is for civic duty." And after the war, all that ended. And so policymakers were very kind of concerned about trying to manage this shift into a peacetime economy, which was the problem of reconverting back into a peacetime economy. And what Truman tried to do was try to have this big labor management conference right after the war ended to try to get the key unions and key management people in business, organizations like the National Association of Manufacturers, the Chamber of Commerce, and others, to try to sort of work out a plan for labor peace after the war. Now that ended in a failure, and employers basically refused to budge on a number of issues. One of the key ones being their right to manage the workplace. And after the war, you had this big strike wave. Now, what's interesting about it, like kind of what you were saying when you led into this about labor being too weak, yet strong but not strong enough. The labor goes on strike, but actually they really weren't in a very strong bargaining position after World War II. One, you had this drastic decline in demand for wartime goods, so most strikes during that strike wave in 45 and 46. Employers didn't even run strike breakers. They just let stock and equipment sit idle. And two, you had this big influx of soldiers coming back from the war. So if they wanted to run strike breakers, they could easily. There was a large supply of labor, and so the leverage of unions was actually quite weak. And so
just to be clear, so we had a lot of scabs if necessary, but at the same time, there was overcapacity to produce that management had, and they were perfectly, that mismatched the demand, I guess, at that point. So they were perfectly happy to basically, we're just going to take a moratorium on our production of whatever we're doing.
And actually, they were saving on labor cost,
right? Right.
So they're not paying their striking workers, and so what happened was there was kind of a standoff over this issue, and it would not have. I don't think that it would have resolved in the favor of labor winning collectively bargained pension plans had it not been for the Truman administration to intervene in these conflicts. And when the Truman administration intervened, it wasn't because they they loved private pensions or they were somehow sort of, just in the pocket of unions or something like that. It was because policymakers were really concerned about sort of getting the American economy working again and capturing those economic opportunities in European and Asian markets. And so Truman administration intervened in some cases directly seizing production. There was a number of cases where Truman actually comes in and uses the law to kind of force workers back to work, to sort of seize production, threaten to run alternative workers if they don't, and the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, which was Truman appointed at the time, made a number of really key rulings relating to labor law around the legality of bargaining over pensions, which essentially encouraged employers to bargain over these things.
So basically, they weighed in favor of the unions, and they strengthened the unions' bargaining in that situation, which was, in some ways, ironically, a ploy to get the management to basically say, hey, we want to just support public expansion of pensions.
Right. I mean, labor wasn't strong enough to win that, and labor was always one element of the Democratic Party's constituency, in particular the Northern Democratic Party. The Southern Democrats were all extremely anti-labor.
Right.
But they didn't have the power within the party or within politics to actually achieve a more robust public program, but they were a significant constituency in Truman's party. He needed the CIO more the CIO needed the CIO for his reelection campaign, and so that sort of encouraged him and his administration to intervene on their side rather than directly on the side of management. So as a result, you get the installment of this massive private plan, which is moving us more towards the market.
But at this point, we should be clear: this is a defined benefit plan, as opposed to what it ultimately turns into, which is a defined contribution plan. So in other words, there's a certain amount of money you're guaranteed in retirement. And at different times, more or less has to go into that plan to bring it up to that point. Whereas what we have today is primarily there's a defined amount you put in, but what you get out, you got to wait and see what happens in the magic black box, essentially.
Exactly.
And so, all right, so the next basically big era is control over this pension money. So we have all this money that's going in that could theoretically be, I mean, right, it's the unions and union members' money that they will receive, whatever, 20 years out, 30 years out, but they don't have control over it. And so it takes us to the early 70s when in the years before ERISA, the adoption of ERISA. Explain what ERISA is and explain the implications of unions not having control of this money.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is incredibly critical, and it has implications that are so much bigger than retirement, because essentially after the adoption of these defined benefit plans after World War II, these end up being funded plans, meaning that money is put into a fund and that fund accumulates through investing, and that is then drawn on to sort of pay out retirees. And the money in those funds grow. I mean, they grow very rapidly. They go from about having something like 22 billion in 1955 to about 10.8 trillion in 2007, right before the crisis. So these become massive pools of finance, and these pension funds actually drastically change the way Wall Street works. If you were to look at who controls stocks prior to the end of World War II, it was primarily households. It was people like the DuPonts, the Rockefellers. It was individuals and their households that controlled about 93% of the stock market. But that shifts, and by the mid 1970s, you find that about a quarter of the stock market is actually controlled by workers' capital, by these collectively bargained pension funds. And now, if you were to look around the world, the majority of stocks are actually controlled by savings, workers' savings. So it totally changes the way the stock market kind of works. Now one way of thinking about this is that's great. Like they invest in the stock market, they make lots of money. Isn't that good for future retirees? Well, it's a bit more of a complicated story than that, because the way that these funds are invested actually have really hurt workers, both in America and elsewhere. One, these funds, the way they were initially invested was in very safe ways. So they'd invest a lot in bonds, things like that, things that had on average lower rate of return but were more reliable. That investment shifts kind of quite drastically towards stocks.
And we should say the reason why that is the case, largely, well, there's multiple reasons, but one is corporations realize and management realizes, like, we can put less in if we predict higher rates of return. So
exactly.
And that, I mean, to a large extent, that was one of the impetuses of ERISA, was like, wow, we got to make sure that actually these projections on return are not so pie in the sky that they're underfunded, in which, of course, we've seen dramatically, and we've particularly seen it in the public sector.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, of course, the other issue is what these things get invested in. If I can control $1 billion, even if I can't go out and spend it on something that I want to buy a bunch of TVs or something, but if I can control $1 billion, I can shape the future of industries or across industries.
No, that's absolutely right. And I think your point about employer control is really crucial, because that actually goes all the way back to the Taft-Hartley Act, which was passed in 1947. We oftentimes look at the Taft-Hartley Act and sort of recognize that it's anti-labor in all sorts of different ways. But one of the things that a lot of people don't sort of realize is that Taft-Hartley also regulates pensions and collectively bargained pensions in particular. And what it did was there was a provision in it that made it so these pension boards, the boards that decide where the money is invested and things like that, could not be controlled, could not have majority control by union representatives. employers could control the whole thing, or they can control the majority, but unions and their representatives could not control the majority of the seats on these pension boards that decide where this is funded. That was put in very intentionally because unions, after these plans got adopted, they wanted to use these funds for more social investing, worker housing, in projects that would benefit the community, things like that. And employers basically are able to take over these pension boards through the law and do exactly with what you just said. Say, well, no, we're just chasing returns, which also means chasing risk, and we're going to invest in things that we can sort of say is going to have a higher rate of return. That's going to allow us to put less money into it. But of course, that also makes these funds much more volatile and much more dependent on the ups and downs of market swings.
And we should say a projected higher rate of return.
Oh yeah, they consistently underperform, and that's actually one of the problems with it. They underperform, and somewhat ironically, this is the greatest tragedy of the story, is that workers retirement funds, which everybody at the time has recognized as deferred wages, right? In collective bargaining, they said, okay, instead of higher wages, we want to establish this plan. That this money was actually invested in anti-labor corporations, right? In the firms that were the most profitable, the ones that were getting the biggest returns on their stock, were doing so precisely because they were lowering labor costs, precisely because they were moving operations overseas into areas that had highly exploited workers, precisely because they were looking for externalities in the environment where they could sort of offset cost onto the environment. It's these firms that have actually benefited and have benefited in the stock market from these funds investments. And what that does is when you buy a firm's stock and you allow that stock to increase in value, what you're doing is you're actually helping that firm get access to cheaper credit, because banks determine interest rates for firms on the basis of a number of things, one of them being their stock value and how well they're doing in the market. It's a signal to whether they'll be able to pay that loan back. And so it's by funneling money essentially into anti-labor firms, we've given those same firms access to cheaper credit, which has, in the long run, in my opinion, directly contributed to this race to the bottom in working standards, right? Both in the U.S. and elsewhere.
So oddly, the half victory, I guess, the 3/4 victory of unions back in terms of getting those defined benefit, which started out as defined benefit pension plans, ended up weakening unions broadly across society as those resources were channeled into what ultimately became anti-union forces in many respects. So, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, we move up through time, and this trend to begin to offset more and more of the risk onto the individual. We see this during the Reagan era, where the Reagan administration ostensibly makes for a tightening of regulations about pensions to make sure that these companies put in the right amount that would actually end up being the payouts that they claim that they're going to have 20 or 30 years down the road. And in fact, what that does is it sort of gives a backdoor for these corporations to say, hey, you know what? We're not even going to do this defined benefit program anymore. We're going to switch to something called 401ks, which was just sort of like almost a happenstance.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's one question is why do we get this shift from these defined benefit plans, which we've been talking about, to 401k plans? And it's kind of a fascinating story, because what happens is that if there's one theme that kind of runs throughout the book about sort of the causes of these shifts. It's that policymakers are basically constantly trying to promote capitalist growth and trying to promote sort of profitability in the economy. And what happens in the 1970s is basically an inflation crisis that we have by March of 1980, inflation rising to over 13%, which is sort of weakening the dollar, which is undermining exchange rates. It's taxing capital stocks. It bankrupts the thrift industry, undermines government security, erodes wealth like savings, and Wall Street was basically very worried about this inflation crisis. And so what happens is policymakers move to try to deal with it, and how they think about it and how they understand where inflation comes from has nothing to do with the sort of Milton Friedman, it's just too much money in circulation type thing, right? That's nobody actually believes that policymakers at the time, and also classical economists that were their advisors, all talked about the inflation crisis as what's called the cost push inflation. That it was actually increased cost of labor that was driving inflation. And policymakers at the Federal Reserve and first in the Carter administration and then in the Reagan administration saw labor costs as being the key drive of this inflation crisis. And so what happens is, this is kind of a side story, but what happens is the Federal Reserve changes monetary policy, and the explicit aim of doing that is actually to weaken unions and to allow and to actually force employers to cut labor costs as a way to lower inflation. What the Reagan administration does with respect to pensions is that it actually increases. 1974, you were talking about earlier. We didn't really talk about it. ERISA is passed, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, and what that did was it put down a host of regulations on private pensions, some of which are actually quite good. It also forced pensions to retire in more risky ways, but that's another story. When Reagan comes into office, he says he's going to repeal ERISA. It's going to be part of his deregulation program. But actually, what Reagan does is he increases the regulatory scope and the bite of this federal legislation, and he does that precisely because it's those unions that actually had some control over their pension plans. Unions that were like in trucking, the Teamsters, or in different sort of building trades that had some control over their pension plans, and that economists and policymakers saw as the key drivers of this inflation. And so what Reagan's trying to do is he's actually trying to weaken their ability in a host of areas, including how they manage their pension funds. And so these increased regulations that are happening in the 1980s, which is not usually what we think about in the Reagan administration,
right,
actually increase the cost of operating a defined benefit plan. And that cost falls primarily on employers' shoulders. And so by the mid-1980s, employers that want to offer some kind of pension plan to their employees are kind of scrambling for alternatives. And it's primarily in non-union companies that they sort of discover the 401k option. 401k was something that was kind of intended for upper management types. It was like meant to supplement a defined benefit. But they discover in it something that is actually not regulated by ERISA at all, and something that doesn't have the sort of costs associated with the paperwork that you have to go through and all that in managing a defined benefit plan. And so you get this shift that's kind of, in a way, a reaction to Reagan's attempt to weaken labor with with regulations.
I imagine it was also fairly opportunistic by Wall Street, which at that time was sort of expanding its retail operation in many respects. And all of a sudden, if they can say, like, oh, we can have an entire business here of, no longer sort of these large, pension managers, essentially, we can open this up to everybody, and there's a lot of fees to be made there.
Oh, big time. Yeah, it's just like the 2 and 20 fee structure. They're going to, which is typically used in mutual funds, where managers essentially are taking as their fee 2% of the total that amount that they're managing, and then 20% of the profit that they make above some certain threshold.
Right.
And you'll hear talk if you read like the financial journalism that the fee structure is changing and they're money managers are lowering their fees, but when you look at the fine print, it's like 1.9 and 18 instead of 2 and 20. So the fee structure isn't all that different now than it was 10, 20 years ago.
So ultimately, we've gone through this history now. So ultimately, give us a sense of what it's done, to relative to the first part of the title of your book, Dismantling Solidarity, and what is. The remedy to me seems fairly, straightforward. It's not just an expansion of Social Security, which, you make the point on some level is a little bit regressive in terms of creating wealth inequality. Because, of course, if you were wealthier while you were working, you're going to make more in retirement from Social Security relative to the average person, the average fee. Just on Social Security in and of itself. The bandwidth is, up to about, I guess, $110,000, $120,000 a year now.
Yep.
So, obviously, I think the solution to something like this is not just an expansion of Social Security, but also probably having an element that is not a function of how much money you made while you were working, right? Some type of baseline that would be added to Social Security. And I guess there's multiple ways of doing that. But what does it do, just broadly speaking, from a sociological perspective, to solidarity to have this dynamic with pensions?
Well, I think that's a great question. Kind of the core issue of the book is basically looking at how this development in our retirement system is actually, it mirrors this development in a lot of other welfare systems. And actually, what's happening and what's happened is that we're moving more and more towards a system where people are reliant on the labor market for their security, and we're basically more and more reliant on employer-provided programs. And the next step to that, which employers want, is to get rid of those completely and just have it be all about individual thrift and savings. And so the big story is really this massive shift that actually it's about the American welfare state. If you look at the U.S., where welfare comes from, it comes overwhelmingly from. And when I say welfare, I'm talking about things like access to health care, dental care, eye care, child care, a pension plan, right? It comes primarily from where you work. About 11% of our GDP is spent on these kind of private programs. Whereas if you look at the OECD average, it's much lower. It's like 2.5% or something like that. And that's also true of our Social Security system. Like the majority of people's savings comes primarily from their own personal or employer-provided programs, about 45% in the U.S., whereas if you look across the OECD, it's much lower. It's like 20. So what that does is it actually puts a greater reliance on the individual to figure out things for themselves, and it shifts risk. This is kind of the critical thing about solidarity, is that solidarity is something that we're all in this together. We see that there are risks associated with modern life, and we're going to establish institutions that can mitigate that risk for everybody. But The opposite of that is putting the risk onto the individual to have the individual figure out how they're gonna manage that risk, and that's what we're moving towards. We're moving towards a system in which
we should say we're sort of returning back to that system on some level.
Exactly.
I mean, we're going back towards the Hunger Games, as it were.
Yeah, and the title of the book it can be a little misleading because it's not like we ever really had solidarity, but we had like this embryo of something in the New Deal. You know, we had this glimmer of hope, and we've kind of basically been moving away from that ever since. And so what that does is I think it basically I think our aim should be to decouple a person's life, their quality of life in retirement, from how well that person did on the market. And what we're doing is we're basically tying a person's non-working life, the quality of their non-working life, more and more to their conditions of work when they were working.
And we should also say just their ability to, just the luck, the wealth that they already started with. This stuff ripples 50, 60 years out.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a critical point because, I don't want what I'm saying right now to be kind of misconstrued as, oh, well, people make bad decisions.
Right.
And actually, even when sometimes progressives talk about, defined contributions and things, 401ks and things like that, they sort of, we will rely on this idea of financial literacy. Well, people just don't know how to invest. Well, actually, it's. I think it's much deeper than that because even people that know how to invest, right, they make mistakes. And even when the market is governed by Wall Street elites who are, in the 0.0001% of the income scale, we have massive crises. Because all investment is a gamble anyway, right?
Right. I mean, the analogy is, why do we have to all become educated on how to bet on horses? Well, let's not tie our retirement into the horse races, essentially. And just because we can teach people when they show up at at the horse race track, the best way to do the trifecta doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be a successful recipe for everybody walking out of there having won.
Exactly. And about this is the I think sometimes the rhetoric says, well, where's the money going to come from? How else would we pay for this? Social Security is underfunded. You just mentioned that wage cap. Where the taxable income on Social Security, I think it's around 120 right now. Anything above that's not taxable. About 20% of households in the U.S. make more than $120,000 a year, and so that is a possible source of financing.
Historically, we would capture 91% or so of income generated through the Social Security tax. 91% of all income generated would be touched in some way by the wage tax. And now it's closer to 85%, 84% because of that income disparity. And that 7%, to make up that 7%, would have the Social Security Trust Fund solvent for, long after all of us listening to this and talking about it are dead. And there's a myriad of other ways to expand it, depending on monetary theory, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea is that there needs to be a political will and an understanding that people's lives after they stop working, I mean, not to mention the lives before they stop working, should not be a function of going to the racetrack. It has shown to not work. But Michael McCarthy, the book is Dismantling Solidarity, Capitalist Politics, and the American Pensions Since the New Deal. We will put a link to it at majority.fm. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, folks, we're going to take a break, head into the fun half, wherein we will take your phone calls and your IMs. A reminder, It is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, you can head over to justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY, get 10% off of your coffee. It's great coffee. And if you buy your crap from Amazon or jet.com, do so at our link at majorityreportkickback.com. I hope people enjoyed that. Anything that gets into Social Security territory, I get very excited about. I think that probably comes across.
Matt was enjoying that so much. He was positively like Cederific. It was amazing.
I like the New Deal angle of it. That's interesting to me.
Yes, Matt is sort of New Deal, what you are to Social Security, what I am to obnoxious rap lyrics.
I had to say the thing that I found really fascinating was the way that when you came out of the war and you needed to basically you were faced with reconversion, right? Changing our economy, sort of how do you deal with all of this capacity and the relative bargaining strengths between workers and capital. And the idea that the unions were just strong enough to basically set us off on the wrong trajectory. I mean, this is obviously something you can understand in retrospect. Nobody could have ever anticipated it going forward at that point, but they were strong enough to not. They were strong enough to get a pension, but not strong enough to get control of that pension and control those dollars, and not strong enough to, and then you had capital, which was just, you see that same, and I think this came up in the interview, the same dynamic in terms of healthcare. The amount of just sheer paperwork, the busy work, the headaches, the projections. If business in this country was relieved of health care as a form of compensation, it would be a huge boon, I think. But, we'll see. The Republicans released their plan today. It is going
in a slightly different direction.
Well, yeah. I mean, the big thing is that comes out of this is that they're going to basically put a couple of Band-Aids on subsidies for people presumably living somewhere between 100% and 400% of poverty. The subsidies will end up being not nearly enough because how they will distort the insurance market by, like we said before, creating adverse selection. They're going to create essentially de facto high-risk, state high-risk pools, which we know from past experience was a dismal failure for the vast majority of people. I mean, and the amount of subsidies they're talking about is not going to go anywhere close enough to providing for that. But it may be enough to convince some of the moderates to sign on to this bill. And then the other thing is while they are slashing Medicaid, they are also retaining the biggest drivers of revenue in the bill in terms of taxes on high-income earners. If you are making over $200,000 as an individual, $250,000 as a couple, there's an extra 0.9% of Medicare tax and 2.9% on capital gains above those levels that basically, I think, funds, if I remember correctly, nearly $700 billion in taxes over the course of 10 years. I think they're just going to try and go after those in the next round of tax reform. But
that was what I was going to ask you, is that's just like a short-term Like, sure, this allows us to win the larger battle. Why not? Right?
Yeah, I mean, the only question is that when you go into, they have two bills that they have set up for reconciliation, this one and the tax reform bill. The tax reform bill is constrained by the same things this was, which is that if you make any, you cannot add to the deficit, and it's not in aggregate. At least that's my understanding. So in other words, I think what's going to come back is they've added some subsidies in this bill, and they're going to get it scored by the CBO next week. The Congressional Budget Office is going to basically say how much, how many people are going to lose their health insurance? What are the deficit numbers going to look like? And the deficit numbers are particularly important because this is a reconciliation bill, and according to rules in the Senate, it cannot add to the deficit. And as arcane as that rule is, in my opinion, but nevertheless, that's the rule. And so they're giving away more money in terms of the subsidies, at least short term. But by keeping those taxes in there, which I don't think was in the last version of the bill, I think there's probably going to be a lot more money floating around. So you may see them roll back some of the cuts to Medicaid to make it more palatable to a couple other Republican senators. Collins. And then maybe in the tax reform bill, they will simply cut some of those services then, and it'll be less, right? Like, what feels worse? We're going to cut $750 billion worth of Medicaid in the Affordable Care Act bill, and then we're going to have tax reform. Or we're going to cut $400 billion worth of Medicaid today, and that's all you're voting for. And then next time, you're only going to have to vote for $300 billion worth of cuts in Medicaid. I think
just
this
pace it out.
Yeah, I have a feeling that's what's going on, but we'll see if this works. We have more sound when we come back. Donald Trump not only apparently spoke to Reuters yesterday, but gave his first TV interview outside of Fox to the esteemed journalist Pat Robertson, who believes that 9/11 happened because of gay people.
Do it.
Kellyanne Conway was on Hannity last night. What's that? The Pat Robertson?
Yes.
I'll get it. I need to hear his voice before we get in there.
It's a classic.
It's been a long time for me. And Vice President Mike Pence's press secretary went on America's Newsroom. And, basically, it's weird. Maybe Mike Pence has a little problem, but he's trying to stay far, far away from this. And we have a couple of this clip this is one of my favorite clips where Florida's first African-American elected state attorney gets pulled over by a cop, and the cop was, relatively polite walking up to the car. You don't see all that, but as soon as he gets the ID and finds out he's pulled over a state attorney and has no reason at all to have pulled over the car except for that she happens to be black, it's pretty funny. All of a sudden, it's Eddie Haskell.
Whoa.
All right. We do this all
I just
the
wanted
time.
to pull you over to say that I'm glad you're driving in this neighborhood.
There was a computer glitch, and I've never seen anything like that before. We'll go through it. The ability of people in that situation to be calm and friendly. I'm talking about the state attorney, to be calm and somewhat friendly, but just ask the devastating questions. I really enjoy that moment, and we will talk about that when we get back. The number 646-257-3920. We got a lot of callers on the hook, as we say in the biz, and we also got the IM machine up. We'll be right back after this brief playing of a song.
sad. She said, no, 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 things are looking bad. She said, no, 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 and if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. Every time I see her look my way, I don't know, girl, what to say. Situation sad. She said, no, 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 things are looking bad. She said, no, 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 and if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Ladies and gentlemen, looking over our IM machine. Lex, empty groin area. I have a friend going to NYU in the fall. Would Michael take him as an intern? Michael, please try to book the G-Man on your show. I follow him on Twitter. He tweets about going on a lot of shows with de minimis audiences, and Sam knows what that means. Gives me the emoticon. And also check out the Chris Lopaco's interview with Raygun, where he reveals his face. Interesting.
Michael is on break right now, just briefly, but send an email.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Joseph Ballin. I know this may come to a shock to people, but I too also endorse Joe Scarborough for president. With Greg as his VP. Don't get too comfy with Tucker Carlson's pseudo-woke anti-interventionism. Called for annihilation of Iran in 2012. Also, check out the new news blogger at allthehypocrisy.com, M. DeWitt. We currently have me, DeWitt, Jimmy Reefercake, and the right-wing Mandela as bloggers there. Meanwhile, the Cuck Report continues to decline into irrelevancy. Dragon Slayer. So while Alpha Male Gorka takes on Cooper in CNN Fake News, Samantha does a deep dive into the weird side of the internet with scaly tentacle testicles. Sad. Epish. I'm worried that Wisconsin GOP will start jacking our pensions from the left with dismantling solidarity. It seems like that collective bargaining undermines labor because we shouldn't get those things from the workplace. When I first read the book, it struck me as hitting Social Security and public benefits from the left and knocking our unions for good measure. Do you feel the same as me as I'm being too oversensitive? I think it is an historical look back. I mean, I think I addressed this right at the break as we went into the break. Epic says, look, business wants to be responsible for all aspects of our lives. They want to drug test us, deny us abortion rights, refuse to pay us for mandatory time. To blame the unions for that? I don't know. The federal government was the only reason we got those gains. They were our middleman and muscle. Unions got what we can get and what we can. Yeah, no. I mean, I don't know if you're responding to what I had said earlier. It was just it was a paradox in a way because they were strong enough to get pensions, but not strong enough to get to get control over the pensions. So, I am not blaming unions for that. Also, quick quiz question for you Coasties, and it may be a trick question. What Great Lake is Milwaukee on?
Superior.
I think
and Michigan, though.
Yeah, Michigan.
So it is a trick question because I think it may be too, but maybe it's not on. Is it on Superior?
No, it's not on Superior. It's on Lake Michigan, I'm pretty sure.
But maybe it's on both.
What do I know?
Yeah, it's quite a ways from Lake Superior.
Okay. Greg, I want to spell out what I meant about Linda Sarsour since it wasn't clear. To the extent she's the rights of women and Muslims, that's good. But then she goes out of her way to do other things. Like what? Like eat? She said in March that if someone is a feminist, they simply cannot be a Zionist because Israel oppresses women, namely Palestinian women. But she's making an argument about intersectionality. I mean, I don't, I don't, with all due respect, Greg, I don't necessarily trust your representation of her argument. But she specifically emphasized if you're for women somewhere, you have to be for women everywhere. It is because of that I bring up why she doesn't apply her own principles to honor killings, why she instead attacks the honor diaries. Okay, I don't know. Kelly, what's your number? There's a great talk by David Harvey called Crisis of Capitalism. Have you guys seen it? Do you know who David Harvey is? I don't know. Maybe if you were a member of the program or you actually took the time to search the archives, you would see that when he released that book, Crisis of Capitalism, we had him on for an hour to talk about it.
Maybe you should check your facts.
Yeah. Maybe it's not just Kelly's number that you don't know. Ladies and gentlemen.
If you join the Michael Brooks Show right now on Patreon, I will text you at the Brooksy level. I will text you Kelly's number. That is a joke. Was that like tasteless or there's more that I could get out of releasing her number for my own ends?
No, that was more like, not a great joke. They can't all be jokes. All right, but speaking of a joke.
What did you just do?
Donald Trump was on Pat Robertson's program. I mean, I don't know what the theory is here going on Pat Robertson's program to push for Obamacare unless he feels like he is pushing Ted Cruz, unless he's feels that he's pushing the conservatives. I mean, right, like you have to ask yourself, who are the people, who are the senators? And we're only talking, now understand, all this is coming down to like 6 people, maybe 7, who actually might not vote for this bill, who are even in play. So when he goes on to a specific outlet, theoretically, there should be a reason why he's going on to that outlet. And if you're going on to the Christian Broadcasting Network, you're probably not going on there to move Susan Collins. Here is Trump speaking to Pat Robertson about health care because, of course.
There are 2 pieces of legislation that the American people are really anxious to see put through. One is this iniquitous Obamacare has got to go and be replaced. Right. Number 2, we've got to have a tax cut, especially for small businesses, corporate tax. How far along are you?
And number 3 is infrastructure, which we're going to do also.
Yeah, exactly.
But number 1, repeal and replace. I am sitting in the Oval Office with a pen in hand, waiting for our senators to give it to me. Mm-hmm. For years, they've been talking about repeal, replace, repeal, replace. I think they passed it 61 times, repeal and replace. But that didn't mean anything because you had the minority, the Republicans. They didn't have the majority, so it wasn't going to get to the president. But if it ever did, Obama wasn't going to sign it. So it didn't mean. Now we have.
All right, there Donald Trump explains that he doesn't understand how a veto works. Because, in fact, they had the majorities. in the House and the Senate, he gets confused. What he meant is, and I guess what he meant by majority meant he didn't have a presidency, and they didn't have enough people to overcome a veto. But
same difference.
Well, also minority Barack Obama.
You didn't have a majority president. You had a non-normal president. So that didn't work out. All right, keep playing.
President that's waiting to sign it. I have pen in hand. So now it means something. You know, those other times, those many, many times that they passed it.
What's the holdup?
You have very good people. These are very good people. We have 52 senators. It's very hard to get, you know, we need almost all of them.
Yeah.
You need almost all of them. And that's the holdup. And states are somewhat different. But with all of that being said, it has to get passed. They have to do it. They have to get together and get it done.
What'll happen if they don't?
Well, I don't even want to talk about it because I think it would be very bad. I will be very angry about it, and a lot of people will be very upset. But I'm sitting waiting for that bill to come to my desk. I hope that they do it. They've been promising it for years. They've been promising it ever since Obamacare, which has failed. It's a failed experiment. It is totally gone. It's out of business. And we have to get this done, repeal and replace.
Mitch McConnell is a tactician of great skill. You
He
think
is.
he can pull it off? It's his job.
He's got to pull it off.
Yeah.
Mitch has to pull it off. He's working very hard. He's got to pull it off.
I honestly, you know, I really wonder why Trump is there. I wonder if they basically are thinking like, we're going to lose the moderates. This is how this is going to go down, and we're going to try and maintain our base. I am now just looking at Twitter to get a sense of what the Republican reaction has been. Rand Paul is going to is basically, it sounds like he's going to filibuster this bill. Ted Cruz is now a yes. Collins is a no on the bill and a motion to proceed. So she...
I'm no fan of Susan Collins, and I think she's very disingenuous. But I do think that, like, I mean, and maybe she'll get primaried, but general election in Maine, if she votes for this, she's done. Like that, voting for this would be
And
like,
look,
I'm going to
she
go
may
become
be
a
thinking,
lobbyist.
I'm going to go run for governor.
What she's
And-
thinking about, there's no way she can get away. Like the poverty in Maine. I mean, other than that crazy core that voted for Lepage, but if there wasn't third-party spoilers, he would be out anyways.
Right.
Like, that's a death sentence in terms of your political career to vote for this in
Well,
Maine.
she doesn't even want it to come to a vote.
Well,
which
that's
is
what
pretty-
I'm saying. I think she's an actual opponent of it. It's just not doable.
We shall see.
The bribes aren't big enough, I guess. Check out the IM.
17 approval, Robert. Let's see. Okay. All right. Let's go to.
Oh, you can't do it?
No. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Oh, you can't. If you could still do the power. I always think that that's.
McConnell is to tactics what Charles Taylor is to blood diamonds. I mean, he's got to get this done.
And they're both very effective. See, I just do Clinton.
Very good. He's gotten so old now, he can barely talk. He just asks a question. Wow. What's the holdup? Nick the Liberal. Republicans and neoliberals have so dominated tax discussions that when I canvass residents, they ignore our pitch about services and immediately demand tax cuts. These are Democratic households, by the way, and our candidates are Bernie-leaning but anxious about pushing back on the tax cut demands. So instead, they trot out an argument for the tax problems could be solved with better management and cutting wasteful spending. It feels like the fall all over again when I had to support Hillary. And it reminds me of the reported booing of Bernie by Democratic congressional members when he suggested that winning is not everything. I mean, there's a real problem And you know, one of Obama's biggest failures, it seems to me, and he sort of almost tiptoed in that direction, but never really went there in a full-throated way, in the way that he sort of claimed he wanted to be Reagan-esque, was to make people understand and appreciate the value of government. Really unfortunate. Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Hold on for 1 second. You're a little bit down. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Try it again.
Dude, bro. The D-Man. Donnie J, bro.
The D-Man?
Don Jr.
Don Jr.? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
dude. Don Jr. The
Don-
ladies call me the D-Man, and it's not because my name is Donald, if you know what I mean.
The D-Man, because your name is Donald.
Yeah, because I've got a dick, dude.
Oh,
and
all
it's
right.
pretty normal sized.
Pretty?
Yeah, it's pretty normal sized. Bro,
Pretty normal. Okay.
you are coming down pretty hard on me lately, and I didn't do the collusion thing. There was no collusioning because you're fake news, and I wanted to break the real story to you, okay?
Oh,
The real story is that you and the fake news are hella jelly of me and my family, dude.
Hella jelly
That's
of you
bottom
and your family.
line. Hella jelly, bro. Here's the deal.
Yeah.
My dad, numero uno. My dad, badass, dude. Hardcore, president, does whatever he wants. Numero dos. Me and Eric, badass bros, laying mad pussy wherever we go. You don't even realize. Numero tres. Ivanka, hot as shit. She's our sister. She knows words too, so she can talk and stuff.
Right.
And here's the deal. You want to be in the family, but you can't. So you're hella jelly, into story, fake news, dude.
Dude, can I ask you, are you still there? You still there? He hung up on me.
That is one of the
Well, I was just
So,
gonna
but
ask
can
him-
I just-
I was just going to ask him how, like he must be busy calling all of these different places, unless we're top on the list. It's pretty impressive. Donald Trump Jr. calling in, telling us that we're helly jelly.
I just think that he's smarter than Donald Jr.
I'm really
Who is?
envious of people who get to go to Africa and chop off elephant tails.
I mean, helly jelly. Sounds like it. We really did. I mean, how many of your dads have had an opportunity to sit down with Pat Robertson? Zero?
None of my dads.
None of your dads, right? Last night, Kellyanne Conway, the chief spokesperson for the Helly Jelly, the objects of our Helly Jelly. What's that? Kellyanne Conway was on Sean Hannity last night, and she, I guess it works as a form of communication, but she brought flashcards saying conclusion, collusion, illusion, and delusion to explain the Trump Jr. scandal. Let's listen in.
So I just want to review, in case you run out of time. This is how I see it so far. This is to help all the people at home. What's the conclusion? Collusion? No, we don't have that yet. I see illusion and delusion. So just so we're clear, everyone, 4 words. Conclusion, collusion, no. Illusion, delusion, yes. I just thought we'd have some fun with words. Sesame's Grover word of the day, perhaps, Sean, because you're absolutely right. To date, they basically set out this Venus flytrap and thought one day we'll catch something 8 months later. And yet, we really appreciate the fact that, we being the American people, I have to say, appreciate the fact that Don Jr. released those emails, appeared on your show for all to see. Compare that to the hiding and the furtiveness that we saw all during the last campaign by the other side.
There you go. Cue cards so that Sean Hannity's audience can understand what she was talking about.
Gonna have some fun with words.
That was a lot of fun. Conclusion, collusion, illusion, and delusion.
It's thank the English language for having so many words that end with S-I-O-N.
I'm not sure I understand why she chose those 4 words. Why the collusion?
Well, because there is no collusion. She actually said there's no collusion yet, which was an interesting phrase, but we don't have that yet.
We don't have collusion yet. We just
Collusion's
have
coming for the
illusion
second
and
term.
delusion. Calling from a 352 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
Hi. Saman calling from Cincinnati,
Hi, Saman.
Ohio.
What's happening?
So I had a criticism from your show and your logic regarding Jimmy Dore. So he had a couple of videos on Seth Rich, and according to your logic, that discredits his platform and his work. But you have a show called Ring of Fire, and you have Bob Kennedy on it, who is an vaccination conspiracy theorist. So by your own logic, doesn't that discredit your platform?
No, because the analogy would be, does Jimmy Dore discredit TYT? And that's the proper analogy for what you're saying. I mean, I've been vocal with Bobby on air about his stance. I mean, I don't think that he would call it anti-vax. I think that's probably a slight exaggeration, but it's enough towards that. But for the sake of argument, I'll stipulate that his positions on vaccinations, I think, are dangerous, and I have told him that. And I've said it on air, and I've said it on that show. I've said it on this show, which is actually, more than, which is more than what anybody at TYT has said about Jimmy Dore. But yes, do I think that it reflects poorly on Ring of Fire that Bobby has that perspective? Yeah, I mean, sort of. I mean, I think that Bobby does a lot of other great things, but yeah, but I've made it very clear on air, and I have,
But he has called into your show multiple times too.
Not to talk
your
about
own show.
Not on this show. On this show, I've had him on,
Yeah.
but not to talk about vaccinations. I've never used.
Then again,
this.
with your own logic, we can. Yeah, sure. So now I'm just saying that with your own logic, we can just discount those crappy stuff because it's just 2 videos after 2,000.
No. Wait a second. Wait.
So
No.
I really cannot get it.
The Seth Rich thing was the latest of his conspiracy mongering. Did you watch his series on whether or not Hillary Clinton had Parkinson's?
I did, yeah.
You did. What did you find from that? What was
Yeah.
your takeaway? Do you think that Jimmy Dore is a doctor? Do you think a doctor could have?
No. My wife is a doctor, so I know that's bullshit. But again,
oh, okay.
I think
And
you
wait
guys,
a second. Did you hear Jimmy
no,
Dore?
no, no.
No. You hold on for a second.
Let me finish.
You let me
sentence.
finish.
One
No.
sentence.
You let me
Okay,
finish.
Sure. All right.
Did you see
All
Jimmy
right.
Dore? Did you see Jimmy Dore say that it was a absolute fear mongering to suggest that Mitch McConnell may get rid of the filibuster in regards to the Supreme Court? Did you see Jimmy Dore not understand that the Democrats?
I don't think he
the
said it's
Republican-
absolute fear mongering. No.
Oh no!
So
What
he's
was the
been
actual
wrong
quote?
on these issues? But I think you guys agree on 90% of stuff. So I cannot get this in fighting at all.
Wait, I'm not done. Do you want me to continue? Did you see the stuff
Sure,
did you see the stuff with Proposition 98 last night? He interviewed David Dayen on,
I know.
And he just sat there and
I
was befuddled by what
I
David
saw
said
that
and
one,
then
but-
just followed it up with somebody else pretending he just didn't find that information out. The guy is a performance artist.
No, I saw that
who
one.
doesn't even do any homework.
But I saw that one. Well, just at least I've lived in 3 countries, and I know 2 languages. And trust me, at least on foreign policy, no one is better than him. and he says it like it is. So I think there are a lot of points that you guys can agree on. Plus, if you want to,
I'm sure there's a lot of points that we can agree on. I am sure there are a ton of points we can agree on. That you can go beyond politics. We actually have the exact same suit. We bought it from the same place, has the same print. But I got news for you.
And
the distance between me sitting here and trying to predict that Hillary Clinton has Parkinson's from a video is so far outside of my realm of possibility. I spent months mocking Bill Frist, a doctor, for trying to diagnose Terry Schiavo, who was in a vegetative state in Florida, so that Congress could justify passing a bill about whether or not a husband had the ability to fulfill his wife's wishes to unplug her. I spent 6 months mocking a doctor for doing that, not just a guy who considers himself a comedian going out there claiming that the Hillary Clinton has Parkinson's because she fainted.
I understand your logic, but
well, okay, great. Now that's where we started this conversation. You didn't understand my logic, and now you understand it.
No, I'm not attacking you. I'm saying that you agree on more than you disagree. Plus,
well, that's great. I would say that's probably the case.
From an American university. No. Can I finish? I have a PhD in computer science from an American university, top American university, and this whole Russia hacking bullshit is also a conspiracy theory. And you guys have spent many shows on that. So does that make you a conspiracy
What show did we talk about Russian hacking?
Oh, you always talk about Russian hacking.
Like what? Give me an example. Like the
I don't know the dates, but this whole you had that intercept NSA document, which was basically nothing. You talk about that. You
the intercept document.
Before that, you did this whole, and you also
we mentioned the intercept document. Yes. You think the intercept document was fake?
That's conspiracy theory. Yeah, of course.
Wait,
I'm not. There's no. If we're talking about doing homework, we have to have someone who is a computer security expert to talk about it, not someone who doesn't have a degree in it.
Well, wait a second. What did we say about the intercept security
then you have done
document?
Wrong too.
Wait, what did we say about it? I mean, look, you can't make an accusation. Listen, hold on. Now, wait a second. I know that you listen. I know that you have a degree from a very prestigious college. I know that you speak 2 languages, but don't make an accusation where you have nothing to back it up. If you want to say that we are pursuing, no, hold on, quiet.
You're just slandering me. You're slandering me.
Okay, I'm going to mute you for a second, and I'm going to let you back on. If you're going to come at me and tell me that we have done Russian hacking conspiracy, we have peddled that stuff, you got to be specific and tell me what you're talking about, because I don't think I've ever said those words. I think I've specifically said I don't A, believe that they hacked anything. B, to the extent that they tried to influence this election, I would be surprised if they didn't, because we do it. D, that if they did do it, I don't think it was a determinative factor in the election. And E, if there was any collusion at all, it was probably unknowingly by the Trump people, because I do feel they are very deep into Russian mafia business. And that's not speculation. That is their special advisor to Donald Trump's name was Felix Seder. And Felix Seder is a known Russian mafia operative, also an asset for the CIA and FBI. And there are documents for all of that. So now you tell me what you're talking about. Hold on, my mute system's not so good.
There's no evidence on it. So
no evidence on what? No evidence on what? No evidence on what?
On hacking.
Yes. When have I ever said there was hacking?
You always say before this week's revelations about Donald Jr. There was no other evidence about this.
Yes, and I never said what you're claiming I said.
Okay, I'm going to email you the video clips. I'm sorry that I don't
don't email them
right now.
Call back.
Yeah.
Call back and tell everybody so everybody can look them up.
Sure, I'll do. Sure.
Okay?
I'll do that.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
look, you want to make an argument that you like Jimmy Dore, and aside, you can look past the Parkinson's, his ability to divine that people have Parkinson's by watching videotape. And you want to look past the fact that he's so desperate to push an agenda that he's claiming that who's ever heard of a mugging that has gone awry where someone gets shot and the wallet's still there? What's that about? Because not only is he a doctor, he's also a criminologist. So what he does is he goes on ride-alongs, and diagnoses people's ailments as he drives by with the cops. If you want to come in and say that you have no problem with Jimmy Dore because of that, and you're upset because Jimmy and I share the same perspective on whatever it is, that's all fine. But if you're going to accuse me of doing or saying something, have one example. We do 18 hours of material a week, maybe 12. You should be able to come up with one example.
I find that when people say by your own logic, they tend to be a bit insecure about whether they have the logic really pinned down.
Yeah.
I find the phrase by your own logic incredibly annoying.
Yeah, and made fun of constantly, which is interesting.
That is funny, yes. That's like, isn't there like that's like a Chapo cottage industry, right?
Conflict in your oeuvre.
A logical fallacy, sir.
But anyways, I just think that if we get back to the facts, that Hillary actually won because the whole election system was hacked by Russia. And no one wants to talk about that.
Coming up
We
next,
talk about that all the time.
Coming up next, Joy Reid will be joining us to
I'm just look,
I don't know why I said her name.
I think it's okay that Bernie's in
off.
Congress, but I think it's a little messed up that his whole campaign was driven by racism and misogyny. Maybe he was collaborating with the Russians too.
Interesting.
Did you
he
see
took
that
a trip there?
Did you see that 30 minutes that Rachel Maddow did on Russia? That was brilliant.
You have admitted multiple times to having watched Rachel's program, which did 30 minutes on Russia. All right, here's that video of Aramis Ayala. Am I pronouncing her name correctly? She is Florida's first African-American elected state attorney. And this is why you're going to hear this reaction from this Orlando cop as to why, well, you're going to hear his reaction as to explaining why he pulled her over. The audio and video start just as he's walking up to the door, I think, and telling her to put her window down.
You're good. What agency are you with?
I'm the state attorney.
Same thing. All
right,
right.
pause it.
Thank
pause
you.
it. So he's just looking at her license, and he says he sees it's a state ID, and he goes, "What agency are you with?" And she says, I'm a state attorney. And then things get a little bit difficult for him. All right, go ahead.
What agency are you with?
I'm the state attorney.
Same thing. All right. Thank you. Your tag didn't come back. Never seen that before. We're good now.
So it was.
We ran the tag. I've never seen it before. A Florida tag. It's never come back to anything before. So that's the reason for the stop.
Pause it. Pause it. And just bring it back just about 10 seconds because she's going to answer. So he says, oh, and this is, I mean, I would bet, I don't know this for sure, and we have a couple of cops who listen to the program and they can tell me, but the old, oh, your tag, I've never seen that before. Our computer had a weird thing where we sent your tag out, nothing came back. And that's why we stopped you. So go on your way. And he tries to walk away. And then she just sort of looks at him and goes, why did you run the tag? All right, so let's.
So that's the reason for the stop.
What was the tag run for?
I'm sorry?
What was the tag run for?
Oh, we run tags all the time, whether it's at traffic lights and that sort of stuff. That's how we figure out if, cars are stolen and that sort of thing. Also, the windows were really dark. I don't have a tint measurer, but that's another reason for the stop.
Pause it. Okay, so, we run tags all the time. And he realizes, and he starts to go through the, for traffic lights, which, of course, she didn't run through any traffic light. And then he goes, to see if a car is stolen. And then he realized, like, oh, I just implied that by looking into this car and seeing a black person driving it, that maybe it might be stolen. And then he goes to the old, I don't have my tint measure. The tint on this car, I love it. Go ahead.
The windows were really dark. I don't have a tint measurer, but that's another reason for the stop.
You guys have cards on you?
Yeah, 1 second. Actually, this isn't my car, but I can write my name down if you'd like.
There you go.
He almost when he started walking away, I kept thinking of the Cameron drop. She's like, state's attorney.
Well, what's interesting about that, I like that as a sort of like sort of specimen of the nervous laugh that I think like it's nothing funny has happened. It's I'm busted as hell and I'm gonna laugh.
See, the reason I ran your plate was because I thought you were a black non-state's attorney.
Like, remember when that quote came out? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't realize that you were.
I mean, what are the odds in Florida, right? The first one.
Exactly. I mean, you got to cut me some slack. The chances of you being a state attorney were pretty low. So, all things considered, I think I was just, doing what I consider to be my job, stopping another black person driving a nice car. And did I mention the tint? Yeah, the tint. It's pretty bad. I would check out that tint. Because, in Florida, so few cars have tints to their windows.
We call it a tint in the window and a tint inside. Oh, you're a district attorney. Just a joke.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Can I write my name down for you?
Yeah, I don't have my tint measure, but you seem really black to be driving that car. So, calling from an 818 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Steve in Washington. Thanks for taking my call.
What's on your mind, Steve?
The interview this morning was really good. I was glad you guys played that. There was one thing he said that really stuck out to me, and it was kind of towards the end of the interview, and he said that we were moving away from kind of spreading risk out among society to putting the risk on the individual. And to me, that translates to what the GOP and others call, quote, freedom now.
Yep.
And I think that's just their simpler way of saying you have the freedom to take the risks that you want, and you have the freedom to avoid having to support anybody else in the society if you don't want to. And there's this weird notion of freedom that just is spread on the right and supports not having to help other people out in the society.
It really is. I mean, it is also a one-way street, right? It's freedom from obligations to society, but you can continue to reap the benefits of it, right? So if you're very wealthy and you have you've been able to accumulate money in the society, you can sit with your delusion that you made that and that's it, and you owe nothing back to society. And I would even add that.
I would add, like, you see this in the arguments we get into with libertarians, that they think that this freedom is, their God-given right to take the individual risk and not have to support anybody else.
Yep.
And it's just, I don't know what kind of society they think they're going to live in, but when things happen to them and they die because they don't have health care, or they die because they don't have retirement or pension, are they going to just die happy because at least they had their freedom, at least they had their risk that they were allowed to take? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it.
I think you've got to watch Braveheart again, and then you'll have that that question answered for you. Appreciate the phone call.
Thank you.
Calling from a 724 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
We have just listened. I'm sorry, I can't do my terrible Gorka impression I was going to do after that guy called in to complain about Jimmy Dore. So we'll skip that, and I'll talk about my own migration from watching TYT videos every night to listening to your program every single day and having become a subscriber, and that all has to do with Jimmy Dore.
Okay.
But back in 2014, I always clicked on a TYT video every now and then, but it was in 2014 I started watching videos daily, especially as they got into the election coverage, and a lot of the incidents between African Americans and police was getting a lot of coverage on TYT.
Yep.
And the one thing that really bothered me about that coverage was Jimmy Dore having to, he wouldn't say anything. He'd just sit there and wait, and wait, and wait. And then he'd pounce. And he'd say that he has police officers in his family. And he knows them. They're bullies. They can't wait to become a police officer so they can use their power to bully people. And that was his argument for the whole thing. Police aren't good people. And I think, most people from their experience in life would know that's not a fact. But he would say it as a fact. And he has that circumstantial evidence from his own life.
Right.
That police officers are bad people.
Yeah, I mean...
And
go ahead.
And so the last straw for me was during the Republican convention, where they had that run-in with Alex Jones.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just Jimmy. I had some problems here and there with pretty much everyone except Ben, Michael Shore, and John Adirola. Everyone else at some point, bothered me at some point. But it was that run-in with Alex Jones where, I don't think Cenk handled it very well, and Jimmy Dore, I found out later, spat on Alex Jones. And I checked a couple videos every now and then after that, but I wound up listening to you guys daily and subscribed a couple months later.
So what do you think?
Yeah.
I mean, what was it? I mean, is that just dispositional? I mean, I don't know if. I mean, I don't think I would have spat on Alex Jones. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's not inconceivable. I mean, I don't feel like I would have. I don't know if I was in that situation. I mean, I
wouldn't have done it from an environmental perspective.
But I don't know. Those are not the high on my list of my issues with Jimmy spitting on Alex Jones.
It was sort of cool.
I
still like
take
Jimmy.
10 minutes going over everything I disagree with. There's a lot of stuff they say about religion as well. I am Catholic, and it is, faith to me that. I mean, look. I think people that don't have that faith don't understand. And they'll criticize people who are religious, and that was pretty widespread on TYT as well. And that's something that I don't think is necessarily intellectually honest, and it's something you don't necessarily get everywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, this is my perspective, is that, I think it's healthy to watch people and listen to people with whom you disagree about different topics. My issues with Jimmy are not about his any of his opinions. I don't care. People have different opinions than me all the time, and I don't even know if our opinions are different. I just think that, peddling bullshit and misinformation, and I mean this in a very strict sense, I think when you peddle this stuff, it is very unhealthy, and it hurts, the credibility of, I mean, look, and to a certain extent, that caller who called in, and I made this clear, one of the things that bothers me about Bobby Kennedy's position on vaccines, which I don't know if it's fair to call it anti-vaxxer, but one of the things that bothers me about it is that, aside from I have a tremendous amount of respect for Bobby, and and he knows this is damaging to his credibility. I mean, he genuinely believes it, and I have some theories as to why he does. Not that I've ever talked to him about those specific aspects of it, but it does reflect poorly on me, and which is why and I've said to him in the past, and we've talked about it on the show publicly, we've talked about it off the show, And I've had the ability to do that. And on that show, I've had the ability to say, like, look, I don't agree with this perspective. And I want to make that clear. And the thing I find about Jimmy that's disingenuous is that he'll come on and have a debate. He will, I don't know, hem and haw and say he's a comedian. He doesn't have the whatever it is, I don't know what it is he's supposed to have other than an ability to read. But that's what he claimed during our debate. He sort of hemmed and hawed about it. And then goes on to continue the argument on Twitter, then invite me onto a show and then not have me on. I mean, there's a reason why the guy doesn't take any phone calls. There's a reason why he doesn't have other people who disagree with him on the show, because he can't win an argument. And so what he does is he sequesters himself. And that's what bothers me about it.
I'd say that Jimmy Dore and Dave Rubin I've both heard say, they always come back to that, well, I'm a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not doing comedy. Like, to me, you and Michael, you are comedians half the time.
I mean,
but
I think
you don't
Jimmy's,
present yourself.
Does comedy, sometimes. I mean, I think I got news for you. Nobody, in my definition of what a comedian is, I am no longer a comedian. Michael's not a comedian. Jimmy's not a comedian. Dave Rubin's not a comedian. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And even if he is,
Dave Rubin's least funny of those four.
It doesn't, it doesn't matter. It's what you're doing at the time. I mean, you can be funny and deliver the news, or you can be funny, but his function, people aren't tuning in because they want comedy. If they did, they would tune into a comedy show. They're tuning in because they're getting their news from him. And I'm just trying to tell people he's full of crap. You can buy, his opinions might be okay, but his facts. All right. I appreciate the call.
Right. If I can say one more thing, it would be that having listened to Jimmy on TYT for about 2 years and having listened to you guys for about the last 2 years, I would say if there's one difference, because you guys probably do down the line agree opinion-wise on everything. It's just your value as a source of information and opinion, your value as a source of how to frame arguments if you were to get into a debate with someone, and just overall value to progressive causes.
I appreciate it. That's a nice thing to say. Thanks.
Good show.
Right. Thank you. Folks, one of the problems, of course, we're facing today is that you'll hear a lot in schools about slavery, but all you hear are the bad parts. Here is Brian Fisher, host of Focal Point on American Family Radio, saying the schools teach too much about slavery and not about the good things about, or I should say, how slavery reflects well on those people who had slaves. Here it is.
How did the United Kingdom make slavery illegal? How did the United States make it illegal and free the slaves? One word, the explanation is Christianity, but that's not taught. See, what's not taught about America is that we freed the slaves. We recognized the evil of slavery, and we did something about it that is to our credit. It's to our shame that we tolerated it. It was a sin. In fact, the Bible says the kind of slavery we practiced in the United States was a death penalty offense. But how many people are being taught that? How many students are taught that today? How many students are taught today if we'd only followed the Bible, we wouldn't have ever had slavery in America? How many students are taught that? In fact, what they're taught is that the Bible is responsible for slavery, that the people use slavery, the Bible to justify slavery. That's what they're taught, and the founders are taught that that's what they did. And you look at curriculum in our schools; it's pro-Islam. You got a lot of schools now that officially say you've got to teach about Islam. You got to have kids memorizing the Islamic conversion prayer. You got to teach them to the 5 pillars of Islam. Get them to do it, so they actually become practicing Muslims for a period of time, and that's considered superior to what's going on in America.
Interesting. First off, I love the argument that we never get credit for ending slavery, only for practicing it. Like, just like that time I was banging that guy's head against the curb. And I could have slammed it more. I only slammed it 3 or 4 times. All you hear about is how I'm slamming his head against the curb, not how I stopped slamming his head against the curb.
Another thing that's been left out of these textbooks is how the Confederacy was all new atheists.
That's right.
You know, on this show and others, and also the Goy Sam Seder or David Dane have criticized me for my housing policies. But look, the priority was to indoctrinate kids into Islam. And when you build on a strong foundation of faith, you have the best housing policies imaginable. There's no homelessness in ISIS-controlled territory. Look it up.
Now, here's I can tell you that Christianity may, in fact, not support slavery, but that Christianity was certainly used to support slavery. Just a quick Google would just take you to examples like in Charleston, South Carolina, the Charleston Mercury paper said both the Old and New Testament gave permission to hold others as slaves. That Jesus supported slavery. Now, it may not be the case that Jesus did. I don't really know. But certainly in the Bible, there isn't a lot of support for slavery. But it does go to show you how at different times, in different eras, depending on the politics, religion, like anything else, like nationalism or anything else, can be hijacked to support bad policies and make people do bad things.
This is the J-Man, and nope, not pro-slavery.
Calling from a
Jesus.
I know, I got it.
No, Matt didn't get it.
Calling from a 917 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Jake the teacher. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jake, what's happening?
Hello?
Hello?
Hey, what's up? Yeah, so the teachers are on summer break now, and so we can listen a lot more and call in.
I love
and
it.
We're wondering if you have any, juicy education interviews coming up, like you've had in the past.
We don't have any scheduled, and I usually tie it into to books. I mean, I guess, all the stories coming out of Betsy DeVos's office are just horrific ones. Right now, she is, they're reevaluating the notion of date rape. In fact, let me get this out here. This is pretty amazing. I mean, this is a little bit off your beat, Jake, but
no, it's okay.
This is Candace Jackson. She is the top civil rights official at the Department of Education. She believes that investigations under the 1972 law known as Title IX have gone deeply awry. In fact, she had this to say. The accusations, 90% of them, talking about assault, sexual assault and rape on campuses, 90% of them fall into the category of, quote, we were both drunk. Quote, we broke up, and 6 months later I found myself under a Title IX investigation because she just decided that our last sleeping together was not quite right. Ms. Jackson later issued a statement clarifying that conclusion was based on feedback from cases involving accused students. And even if complaints don't allege violence, all sexual harassment and sexual assault must be taken seriously, except for we think 90% of it is just, they had too much to drink.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, there's an 18-state lawsuit that's claiming that the rollback of the Department of Civil Rights within the Department of Education, it's not only unfair on that campus rape issue because they're basically taking the male side and they're meeting with the male groups, but there's a lot of other civil rights issues way beyond that. Everything from racial discrimination to special ed, handicapped people, and so this is Betsy DeVos going on offense and really, just trying to say, don't even bother. We're really going to be downsizing.
In terms
the
of
Department
education, I feel like, and I think this is part of the reason why there was such pushback on Betsy DeVos. And I think there's a good argument that, like, look, a guy like Jeff Sessions, he's the head of the Department of Justice and can do broad-based a lot more damage. But in terms of the setback to education, because I feel like a big, I don't want to overstate this, but that the battle between so-called educational reform and really educators, because I really do think it was sort of set up that way, people who actually knew something about teaching, was going in the right direction. That there was like a broader understanding of the corporate reform agenda was on its heels a little bit, and now it's a completely new world of just trying to maintain. I really feel like, that's
yeah. The opt-out movement did turn back, a lot of the push that you saw for standardized testing and Common Core and things like that.
And then if you look in Massachusetts, where there was a big referendum win by those people opposing charters run amok. There was a lot of indications that people are starting to get it, but
but that's the thing. We're still on education reform battle 1.0, and the reformers are on 2.0.
Right.
And the really next big thing is, I don't know if you saw the announcement by Mark Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla Chan. They're going to be investing like billions of dollars and in a very long-term initiative to offer personalized learning, and they really want to transform the very concept of school. And they're not alone. Data mining, and personalizing the learning experience.
Well, Zuckerberg,
it's already going on.
Zuckerberg spent nearly a decade teaching, didn't he? Oh, wait a
No,
second.
no.
He never ever taught. He just made a computer software program that hooked people up together based upon their pictures in the pig book, as they used to call it.
Will you check out the IMs for a second, Matt?
Yeah, and he's like, 32 years old. So, this is what happens when you have enough money to kind of shape-shift anything you want. And his idea is, that he wants to get a lot more involved in the education of kids. Without knowing the crafts, without knowing how kids learn and the experience of doing it.
Well, of course. The dilemma, look, and this has been the ongoing dilemma, and we'll look for, and if you have any suggestions, Jake, send me an email. But let me just leave it here, is that, the problem is, and it gets down to even as Michael IMs me, the people who are arguing, and again, quotations, for education reform, and, are very well practiced at communications, at business, at selling things. And
it's the revolving door.
Because, and even just the idea of calling it reform, right? But on the other side, educators are, because what they are trying to protect is the ability to be nuanced as a teacher, to have the ability to say, this student would gain from this, and that student would gain from that. And you can't measure them like they're widgets. It just doesn't work that way, because their understanding of the educational process and the way that people learn, in some ways, ill suits them to make a political argument. And that has been, I think part of the problem, but I think there's been more savvy that has been growing on that side of the equation. But send me an email about who you suggest. Appreciate the call.
Yeah, sure. What's the email? Is that
majorityreporters@gmail.com. Yeah. Thanks, man. Bye.
Okay. Thanks, man. Bye.
But I'm just thinking what Zuckerberg did do, and it was this stuff was kind of piloted in Newark, and the backlash it didn't work as far as I understand. The new mayor ran on that. Opposing it was a very significant part of his platform. I think he is in public education in Newark. Actually, he was Amiri Baraka's son too. But where this was piloted, it did not work well for the actual community.
Happy Canoe. Glenn Greenwald says there's a double standard in all the hoopla about Don Jr., i.e., that the Clinton campaign sought out the Steele dossier info from equally shady sources with the same intent. Does he have a point? He has a limited point, I would say. I got asked this question by email the other day. I mean, but I think his reading of why there's a hoopla is too narrow. One, there has been a tremendous amount of lying that has covered up that meeting, right, by top campaign officials. Now, maybe Clinton, well, let me even back up before then. First off, the Clinton campaign sought out the Steele dossier info from, I don't know if it's an equally shady source, but it's a certainly different ilk of source. The Steele dossier was Steele was initially hired by a PAC associated with Jeb Bush. Certainly it was, and I think the sourcing on that is fair. At the very least, it's clear that it was a Republican PAC that paid for this initially. Following that, it was shopped to the Clinton people, and they continued funding it. Not necessarily the Clinton campaign, but probably a PAC supportive of Clinton. This is hiring a former operative of British intelligence to go out and find information. That's where I would say the similarities end with the stories, as far as I can tell, because really with what was relevant about the Trump Jr. stuff was, A, that we know he had lied about it. We know that Jared Kushner lied about it and had to revise his security clearance thing. We know that Manafort had lied about it. We know that the intent, the idea, and I never thought that they would, I've said many times, like, I don't see why they would collude with Russia, even if, they were going to bet. Why would they do it? I don't know why they would do it. They're dumb.
We're very dumb.
But clearly it shows a willingness to do it and an awareness at that time, based upon the emails, that they were aware, or at least unsurprised, that Russia was trying to help Trump. The main thing that's relevant about this stuff, from my perspective, is just the progress of the investigation. He's in trouble. Kushner's in trouble. I think it indicates that somebody in the White House is throwing people under the bus. So I think the hoopla, if you want to say from like a narrow perspective, are these similar? I would say they're similar. I don't think they're the same. I mean, one guy's a private actor, and one person is at least introduced as being, from the Russian government, or sent from the Russian government. But I think the hoopla is a function of, wow, there's a lot of things that we were led to believe by this administration that are not true. And I think that's the issue more than the other stuff. Look, they hype it. Of course they do. Yeah, I get it. I mean, I get why Republicans harped about Benghazi the whole time, too. And I thought that was a load of crap.
Well, it's funny that Kellyanne Conway said in that clip earlier that they put a Venus flytrap out there and just were looking to find anything, which is basically their whole playbook since Gingrich.
Right. Calling from a 203 area code. Who's this?
Hey, Sam, let me just put you on mute. Okay. Hi, this is Adam calling from Oregon.
Hello, Adam. What's on your mind?
I guess I kind of wanted to talk about both. It's larger than Jimmy, but that's what's motivating the call. I'm feeling like I was listening to Angela Nagel and all the conversations she was having about kill all normies now that it's out. And there's always been a strain on the left that it's making me think about, and the fact that I feel like after a decade or so online that I could write a book of kill all normies on the left, because I keep on thinking about how you, immediately in the aftermath of Jimmy kind of freaking out, I've heard you a number of times, both from me calling in and others talking about it, this idea that the fever will break, that when it gets bad enough, they'll see Trump is, I mean, this is different. We're not, you guys aren't quite getting it. This is happening. And all of your kind of prognostications about, oh, well, McConnell won't let, you keep on bringing up each of the actual facts that's disproving their case and disproving that the riot's coming, that the revolution's coming. But if you head into any of these communities online where these people talk and where they worship guys like Dorr and the entire world beyond him, and they speak in his language, they're obsessed with tribe and they're obsessed with storyline. And there's no room in either of those things for fact, for reality, for our shared, whatever, to fall into that. And so do you remember, I want to ask, do you remember during your conversation with Jimmy, there was a moment where you told him that you were a Bernie supporter and he was surprised?
Vaguely.
So he had been, kind of hammering at you vaguely for MSNBC stuff and for these few things. And why were you guys so, this with Hillary and telling us she was inevitable? And you just kind of stopped him and were like, I was a very vigorous Bernie supporter. And you told him, and he didn't hear it, but you told him I was the first one to interview him on what you could call, I guess, MSM, or national at least.
Right.
And it threw him off. And the rest of the conversation, he was combative but more jokey. He was less kind of on the attack in a direct way, because suddenly he realized, I have no script for this guy. I have no, storyline.
Right.
And every day I deal with both individuals and communities who I can tell you some of them are, Trump supporters trying to stir shit, but some of them, they're the same people every day, and they're real people who are telling me, they still use the terminology of Sharia blue and all this stuff, and they really believe it. They've bought a lot of Fox News stuff, and it's the fluoride people, but there's a younger, new, just like the alt-right, there's a new young group that has picked up the anti-enlightenment banner, and there's no room for this stuff. If you are outside the team, or if they decide you are, and I literally, mid-conversation, usually bring up Shattered and say, have you read it yet? It's worse than you thought. And they're like, yeah, I know. You guys have your script. You're supposed to flip it and pretend no, I'm one of you guys, dog. I'm like, no, really, are you not getting there's someone in between here? And I guess I'm wondering, I don't know if I could just form it into a question or somewhere for you to go with it.
I know.
What do we do if you're wrong and there is no 2 months and they're like, all right, fine. It's bad. You were right.
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I honestly, I don't know the answer to that. But I think that look, social media tends to amplify things, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in bad ways. It certainly distorts things, right? Or it distorts the size of any given movement. I mean, the implications of social media are how they impact really. You got to think of it as like a series of concentric circles, right? You have a lot of media people who are on social media, and they take their cues from what's around them. I mean, people can't help but do that, right? What you're saying to someone who just listens to this show and never goes on Twitter, never goes to Reddit, never goes on Facebook, seems like you're talking from a different planet. They don't experience this at all. It's out there, but they don't experience it at all. I think, I mean, I don't know what the answer is if some of these people don't come around. We're going to see what happens in 2018. If the Democrats take control of Congress, I think you're going to continue to see it's hard to sort of disaggregate what's hopeful on my part and what's not, but so understand this is a hopeful prediction, but also I think somewhat where it's going to land. If the Democrats take Congress, you're going to see a continued split between, within the party. And I don't even consider the people you're talking about to be a part of a dichotomy. They're almost like a third player, at least, and there's other players, obviously, but there's a genuine left movement out there. There's a genuine, growing sense of the left. And there's also a genuine sort of establishment, what are now called liberals, and that are trying to negotiate things. And then there's those other people you're talking about who's just so tribal that they have a narrative that really has nothing to do with politics, it seems to me. It happens to refer to politics, but it doesn't have much to do with actual politicking. And I think and they will join up with the left, and I think hopefully be subsumed by a more responsible, and by responsible I just mean not stupid, left that is actually agitating for left politics. If the Democrats don't take any of the Senate and the House in 2018, it's going to end up crushing the left by 2020, I think. And we're going to end up with a nominee who is going to be, I think, considerably more centrist than we would like. That's the way I think it's going to go.
If I could just interject here at the end.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind, if I just quickly interject at the end to finish it off and say, I think the challenge we all have to, because this isn't unknowable, there is no, we have to figure out how we stop decent, well-meaning, whatever, what MLK would, I guess, call the well-meaning white moderate who does nothing, the Jenks of the world who are going to potentially divert too much of that real left movement and energy towards people like Jimmy, because he and they call that the left. They call that progressive. They say some on the left, and they mean them. And so the thing I think we have to do going forward is figuring out the people who hold the power, because all these followers are just going to be tribe, and Jimmy's just going to be Jimmy. But the people who hold the power, how do we get through to them? Because they're not you. They don't, just like Jimmy doesn't. It's not like Cenk is answering people's IMs unless you're a favorite or unless you're kind of telling him what he wants to hear. So how do we get through to them and make clear, if you kill this energy, if you send too many of these people off, I mean, I already subscribed to Michael's show because it needs to kick the shit out of the two of you. You guys need to kick the shit out of that side of things, because too many people are going to get diverted off the good course and into this never land. And I guess my answer, and the one I want to hear from everyone else, is my answer is to subscribe to short shows like yours and Michael's, and raise your voices up higher than
well, I mean, to a certain extent,
thank you for your work.
Thank you. I appreciate the call.
Thank you.
And that's stuff that you guys have to do, I mean, you have to get out there and spread the word. We can only do, so much. But God willing. Maybe we can do more.
Excuse you, Sam. Excuse you.
God willing.
No. No.
What?
May Allah bless it.
Well, I was trying to segue into this last sound clip we had. You know what I'm saying?
Inshallah.
Do you know where did this Mark Taylor guy come from?
I don't think I've ever heard of him before this, actually.
Skywatch TV is where he's appearing on, but I don't know.
Oh, actually, I'm pitching a development deal for them.
Oh. I was in a restaurant last night that had a local station on, and Boris, what's his face, Epstein, Came on.
Sinclair.
All right.
It must be a Sinclair media channel.
He's mandated Sinclair commentary.
Yeah, they've upped the
Yeah.
quota like 3 times how many
Yeah.
commentaries they need to run.
Well, yeah, and Sinclair had a deal with the Trump administration, and they got their payback with the FCC awarding of their being able to buy all those stations. And it really occurred to me. I mean, a guy just comes on like it's like he's a news commentator. But I don't know why they just have a guy who worked on the Trump administration is now as the commentator, and that's it. There's nobody to refute it. Everybody just sort of looks around as if this is like, oh, wow, we got this great thinker, Boris, and
And there is
it occurred to me.
I'm sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Well, it just occurred to me, we are, 5 or 10 years out from probably realizing, like, oh my God, we're really getting destroyed in the media again. And it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a real problem.
I was also like, the other thing that you notice about Boris is that there's no element of like, hey, this guy, I saw him as a campaign surrogate, and he's got some real chops for TV.
Right.
It's like, the authoritarian is 1984, but they say this about Mr. Trump because
low bar.
They hate.
Low bar, in other words. All right, but in the meantime, on Skywatch TV, Mark Taylor, who is a former firefighter,
who's now wrote the Trump conspiracy or the Trump. I'll look it up, but I think it's mentioned in here. It's like the Trump prophecies, actually, is what it's called.
Yeah, the Trump prophecy, because he was a prophet who 5 years ago, folks, back only when people would speculate about Donald Trump running for office, because in 2012 he, tested the waters. You'll recall, and Mitt Romney had to go and kiss the ring. In fact, they all kissed his ring. But this former firefighter was convinced that Donald Trump would run and win. Ladies and gentlemen, he's a prophet. Here he is.
Just a couple of minutes. What were you told, if anything, about why Donald Trump now?
It wasn't so much as now, I guess, as it is what his purpose was. And that was to help turn America around. And it's not just America, what people have to understand. This is the battle for the entire earth right now.
Earth.
And
goddamn right.
God right now has denied the enemy's timeline. That is the bottom line. And that's why you're seeing the enemy kicking and screaming right now. He has denied the timeline of what they thought they were going to accomplish. And now it's going to be the army of God now who's going to take the fight to the enemy so that the gospel can go forth throughout the earth. And they see that. We've cut the head off that snake November 8th, so to speak. And now it's kicking, it's screaming, it's not liking it. So right now you're going to see victory.
Wait a second. Pause it. I want you to go back a second. But did he say that they cut the head off the snake and now the snake is kicking? Is that the...
And screaming.
And screaming. Without it.
The screaming I get because you could just gargling through your...
After the head's cut off, you can still scream.
Yeah. But what happens? Like you get your head cut off as a snake and then you grow legs and you start to kick? I don't get it. But go ahead.
You're not a prophet.
No.
We've cut the head off that snake November 8th, so to speak. And now it's kicking, it's screaming, it's not liking it. So right now you're going to see victory after victory after victory for the army of God right now. So, but it was more so as timing, because this was all supposed to really go down in 2012 is what the Lord told me. Because I thought it was supposed to happen in 2012. And the Lord said, no, my people weren't ready yet. That's why I allowed Obama to stay in for another 4 years, so that they could build a righteous anger and say enough is enough, and they would rise to the occasion, which is exactly what we saw happen.
Okay.
This is what happens when you have a devil talk prophecy.
Man, God really, I mean, if God really is responsible for Donald Trump, super sense of humor. I mean, all those years, right? Convincing us it was all about piety, and then it's going to be Donald Trump. I love it.
Well, look, when we go to phase 2, and Michelle and I work on our presidential library project, which all I'll say is might involve some innovative plans for the 9/11 memorial. We'll see what happens with phase 2. There's real prophecy. Allahu Akbar.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 266 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
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 Is this Sam?
Yes.
Hello, I called today because I have a huge win in the battle of ideas. Maybe if I lived in Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I can understand the denial of the basic First Amendment privileges, like the uppity folk at Evergreen College trying to get a professor fired. Maybe I can understand why the regressive left participates in the oppression Olympics to see who's more the victim. Now, I've said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's why my brother Dave Rubin supports the right of a Christian baker to refuse to bake a cake for a gay wedding. But he's gay. He's totally gay. Did you know that he's gay? But he rejects identity politics. And I sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
If I had my applause button, I would be pushing.
That was very good.
There has been some calls recently, both of Reagan's Trump Jr.'s, the Mandela call about the threesome with Josh's mom, and that one.
I thought at the end, though, he was going to say, free at last, free at last. Thank God Dave Rubin is free at last. 515 area code. Who's this?
Hey, this is Sanjeeva from Ames, Iowa.
Hi, Sanjeeva. How are you?
Good. I was just going to say Bernie Kratz have won the chairmanship of the Utah Democratic Party, and oddly enough, Arkansas. I guess Bernie or Bust Bill was really trolling us this whole time.
And you also, there was some big Democratic wins in Oklahoma, too, in the state Senate, I think, right? I mean, there's been,
Yep.
Go ahead.
The Oklahoma Democratic Party leader, it's kind of weird. She wasn't endorsed by Bernie, but she's really far left, and she's a very seasoned political operative, and very young, too. She's my age, but she's, done campaigns since she was, 16.
Wow.
So I guess it's on her.
I spoke to John Nichols on Ring of Fire about this week, that there is on the state Senate level and on the state level, there have been some wins that, sort of go under the radar, not your radar, of course, but broadly speaking, under the radar. I mean, so that is encouraging. But
yeah, my question I wanted to ask you about is the battle of the two Stacys in Georgia's governor's race. Stacey Abrams, African-American woman, minority leader. She's running, their policy-wise, it's like wolf and whack. There's really no difference that much in policy. But they have different ways of, campaigning. Stacey's is, based off, Steve Phillips' philosophy of the demographics or destiny thing, and she wants to register all these new voters and stuff. But I'm a little skeptical of that philosophy right now. Stacey Evans, she's influencing. She kind of reminds me of Bill Clinton. She's more progressive than Bill Clinton, but she had a really good ad about the Hope Scholarship, which gave tuition-free scholarship for Georgians if they have a B- or lower. But Stacey Abrams and the Republicans compromised it up to an A-. So I don't know what to make of that race and which philosophy for campaigning should be done, because we need to win more House seats than the bare 23 if we want to at least undo some of the damage the Republicans are going to do.
I feel like that's a question that someone from Georgia could answer, because particularly in Georgia, that demographics is destiny argument actually seems to make a little bit more sense to me, right? In Georgia.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of the populations there and how they're changing. I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. I haven't seen enough of either candidate to make an assessment. I just don't know. But,
yeah.
I guess it'll be interesting to find out.
But is it sustainable to keep getting 27% of the white vote in the South is my question. Could we win with that in the future or even the far future.
I don't know if that's. I don't know if you can continue to get that. I don't know. I don't know how people react to this. I mean, I think to a certain extent.
I mean, there's always going to be hard Fox News supporting people who will never vote for a Democrat.
That's right.
Are there some could be pliable, or who don't vote?
I think to the extent that there's a big amount of potential voters who don't vote for Democrats, the sheer numbers would be more akin to the demographics is destiny argument. But it's just a question of can you reach those people and get them to vote? I mean, the upside of a campaign like that is you're building something. Even in losing, you're building something if it's done properly. So I don't know.
Yeah, Bernie has like a new Southern strategy. He's got Chokwe Lumumba in Jackson, Mississippi. He's endorsed the mayoral candidate in Birmingham, and the third one in Atlanta. If he wins, if those three mayors win, there's an infrastructure there for Bernie to win those, at least do better than he did in the last Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. Because they're mayors of big cities where the Democratic vote's located, right?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, got to jump.
That's all I
Appreciate
had
it.
to say.
All right. Appreciate it. Bye. Interesting to watch. I hadn't quite picked up on his strategy. All right, last call of the day, 646. Where are you calling from? Who's this? (646) Going once? Going twice?
Hey, Sam. Hey, Sammy.
Yeah, who's this?
Billy Buckner.
Billy Buckner, what's on your mind?
I would like to know how you get to data analytics not being determinative in an election that was decided by 70,000 votes over 6.7 million votes in 3 states, when there are 4 of the highest capitalized companies in the world whose combined market capitalization exceeds $2 trillion, and that their business is based on, convincing far more than 8 1/1000ths of a single percentage point.
So you're asking me how I can say that that the data analytics, are you talking about like Cambridge Analytics and Kushner and that? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm suggesting that there is a well-developed, highly capitalized, ultra-efficient capability that's been devoted to this for 20 years now.
Well,
and 70,000 votes, over 6.7 million votes.
I can tell you, you want a great example? It is entirely possible that swung it. I can also tell you that I don't want to exaggerate this, but just there's a little bit of hyperbole here, but the entire force of Google was supporting Clinton, right? Eric Schmidt, what was that secret little thing that we went to?
The groundwork.
The groundwork. I mean, to find somebody.
Sammy, if a parent throws a rock at a baseball that your daughter is about to catch at first base, that impacts her ability to catch that throw. You can't get into relativism about all the issues and things that happened. Okay,
so
we have to get away from this.
Okay, so wait a second. So what? You got to be a little bit more straightforward in what you're asking me, because I'm not sure. You have something in mind that I've referenced that I'm not clear on what it is.
Here's what it is, Sam.
That I'm too dismissive
that
of
advanced
what
analytics companies can impact 1 out of 1,000th of a percentage, which is what 70,000 divided by 6.7 million is.
Right.
These are just straight numbers.
Well,
all of these companies are based on an incredibly large market capitalization.
Okay,
and
no,
profit.
I get that part.
Not just revenue.
I get that part.
Profit.
But what do you?
You guys
but
are
wait a
actually
second.
making
But
a
hold
lot
on.
of money, changing far higher percentages than this stuff.
But dude, what makes you think that they're? I'm not 100% sure I understand what you're saying here. But what makes you think they went in to just change those 70,000? In other words, my point is, they may have changed all sorts of different things. Like, you're just assuming.
So then how are you
second.
able to say
You're
that it wasn't determinative? So that's the problem. Sam. That's what you got to pull out.
Everything's determinative. I mean, when it's that small of a margin, everything is.
Exactly. So you're right. You're exactly right. So if you have an algebraic equation, which is what this election was, which yes, she didn't go to Wisconsin. Yes, she relied on this, she relied on that. She was a terrible candidate. Yes, but it is wrong, factually wrong, to be determinative. That to say I do not believe that this was determinative in the election when you don't know what that value is in that algebraic question.
Well, look, I think I've said many times that there are at least a half a dozen but-fors, okay? And by that, I mean, but for this...
A parent throwing a rock at the ball your daughter's about to catch is not the same thing as how many grounders you hit her or that you play catch with her.
But wait
This
a second.
is different.
But wait a second. But what makes you think that there's? I mean, it's not just a parent throwing a ball to their daughter. It's like my entire family, my extended family, is throwing and walking balls to my daughter. And if the idea is to get that ball,
that's not what I said. I'm saying an opposing parent.
I don't even know what you're arguing with me
a ball
about.
your daughter was about to catch. They're not helpful rocks.
Okay, wait a second. Wait a second. This analogy is not helping.
Limits,
what is it that you're taking issue with that I don't think?
Way outside of norms. Way outside of tradition.
Wait a second. You gotta, just hold on. I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Okay. So let me just. Are you saying that when I discount the impact, if Cambridge Analytics provided information to a team of, a squad of meme pushers, if they did that, when I say that I don't know that that was determinative of the election, is that what you're taking issue with?
You said earlier that you didn't think it was determinative of the election, and I think that what you meant to say was it is one of the many reasons why Hillary Clinton lost. But for me, it is not appropriate in a race like we just defined to say that it couldn't be determinative. If Sam Stein, okay, one of the good ones, was on Morning Joe the other day or today, and he said he was struck. When he went out and did stories right after that, he was struck by how many of the people he talked to who were declared last-minute Trump voters said they were swayed by stories that were quite demonstrably false.
Right. Okay. Well,
so I know it's anecdotal.
Look.
But when we have like this whole clear path,
let me ask you something.
Here's how it could have happened.
Let me ask you this.
Here's who the people.
Okay.
Sure.
Let me put it in terms of your analogy. I throw a ball to my daughter. Okay. Someone else throws a rock that prevents her from catching it.
A game. You're in a game. No.
Okay.
You're
I'm in a
game.
game.
Your
I'm in a
daughter
game.
Is playing in
my
a
daughter's
game.
okay.
She's in a contest with rules and regulations.
Okay. So, someone throws the second baseman throws a ball to the first baseman. Let's leave our daughters out of it, okay? Someone then throws a rock at the first baseman. And someone throws a bottle at the first baseman. And someone lights off a firecracker. And someone lights the center fielder on fire. And a loud explosion takes place. And a concession guy screams, "Oh my God, I'm having a heart attack." And she doesn't catch the ball. Was the rock determinative?
That's not helpful hyperbole, Sam. We know that
But
all
I'm
of these
saying
elections are
there
going to
were
be very
20
close.
there were
Sam,
20
do we not know most of
but-fors.
these elections are going to be close?
The 20 but
they're going to be close going forward forever.
Okay,
for our foreseeable future, they're going to be close going forward. Not like when you and I were kids, where some of the states were definitely blue, some of them were definitely red. We had moderate Republicans. That shit's gone. Okay, every election is going to be this close, and 3 points is really huge now.
I get it. But
when you can micro-target based on an electoral college system,
but
and not
I'm
a
just
popular
saying
vote system,
that if
like
there
they
are
did,
20 different things that went wrong,
then you're being naive.
If
you're
20
being naive to the capabilities that are available to companies and government entities right now that can affect elections. Okay, there's a serious question about whether we're ever going to have another fair elections between voter suppression.
I think there's a legitimate question as to whether or not
Jeff
we've
Sessions
had
calling people
all
out
these
and saying,
these
okay,
things have been fair.
people off elections.
I think there's a legitimate question.
It is wrong for you to stop staying so far off the Russian story. It's real. It's true. It happened.
But wait a second. What is real and what is true and what happened?
In a country where you got to be cool, you don't want to be wrong about this one because it's a big one to be wrong about. Taibbi's got the same thing too.
But wait a second.
These things are actually happening.
But wait a second. Have you seen evidence that Cambridge Analytics used 1,000 Russian agents to do this stuff on Facebook?
How about the guy who was in the data, who was running the data system, who just happened to leave up the voter rolls that he got as the Trump campaign got? The voter rolls that everybody's worried about him getting right now.
Do you remember the shit in New Hampshire where the Republicans?
Where anybody get it without a password.
I understand.
They took it. That's when they took it, Sam.
Oh, so there was no.
You don't leave stuff up like that.
Okay.
I'm in that business. Okay. You don't leave stuff like that up there. You never let it get up there.
All right. Look.
You just don't put large quantities of critical data that you have fiduciary responsibility for up so somebody could get to it without a password.
Well, look.
Accidental.
I don't know what you're arguing. You want me to accept as a fact something that you know because of what you've done in your work.
No, Sam, I want you to stop saying that it's not determinative.
It's not any more than that rock is determinative of when that guy did not catch the ball at first base with all those other things that went off.
That's a bunch of...
No.
Yeah, but that's right. And if Trump died, he wouldn't have won either, right? If the helicopter chopped... Like, that what is that?
No, I'm not being hypothetical. I'm not being hypothetical about this. She relied on those same data analysts to model who was going to vote for her, and she was wrong. And that had nothing to do with the fake news.
Sam, we are not part of her campaign. We are not responsible for it. We are the citizens of the United States of America. We are the customers in all this. All we did was show up and vote.
If there's
proof, and what we got back. Stop making...
If there's proof, I'm there. I'm not telling people not to investigate.
It's taking a while to come out, Sam.
Well,
this stuff takes a while to come out.
But what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do?
Stop being a goddamn liar.
I want you to say that it is not impossible for a substantial, well-funded, intelligent, talented group of engineers couldn't sway 70,000 votes over 6.7 million. If they had the voter rolls, they had the addresses, they had their Facebook places, their Twitter places, where they could send all these stories.
Of course they could.
Last minute.
Of course they could.
What percentage of people make their votes?
Of course they could.
How many people make their votes?
Of course they could. When have I ever denied that? We had somebody on who I did for 45 minutes who I talked about the dangers of like what Google could do just in terms of during search placements. Do you remember that guy?
I did. I agree. And I probably said an IN that day, right? Like I understand.
I just don't know
what
like it, listen, I am not disputing the fact.
Yes, you are. Stop lying.
I am not disputing the fact that people could do that. I'm just I'm just saying I have not seen evidence that actually happened. I'm not saying that the evidence won't
That's
show
not
up.
what you said earlier today. What you said earlier today was you were talking to Greg or something.
Listen,
Dumbass.
I still think
And you
It's
said,
always a bad
wait a
idea to
second,
take
wait a
something
second.
from a bread
I
conversation.
have come out and said that I do not think that was determinative.
Okay, wait a
Now,
second.
that is
Hold on,
not the
hold on,
right
hold on,
phrasing
hold
for
on,
it. You
hold
could
on,
say that she
hold
made
on.
other mistakes that were
Up
bigger
until
that
this
she could have
week,
overcome
up
that
until
with.
this week, the idea that Kushner had been involved in that type of stuff was not reported. And what I argue is that the stuff from the DNC.
What are you talking about? He had meetings with the Russian ambassador. Like, why do we
but
keep
wait a
forgetting
second,
this? Well, I
dude,
feel like all the people in the media need to have the timeline all the time that has all the stuff.
But wait a second.
Right? Like, so
wait a
we
second.
have to go back
Wait
to
a
zero.
second.
Like,
Wait a second.
like
Wait a
Jared
second.
Kushner
Wait a
didn't
second.
lie about meeting with the
Wait a
ambassador.
second. Wait a
in
second.
in
All right,
Trump
I got to
Towers.
let you go because you're not listening. You're just ranting at me, and you.
A little bit.
Not a little bit. Not a little bit. A lot of it. You're just ranting at me as if I'm not even here.
They threw a goddamn rock at your daughter, and you're saying nothing.
The DNC email leak or the Podesta email leak, okay, which up until this week was what the collusion was supposedly about. This week it was reported that the House and Senate Intel committees and Mueller were investigating Kushner's data operation relationship with those supposed 1,000 Russian bots. Okay? Do I think that they would have the ability to influence 70,000 people? Yes, of course. But also, I think that Hillary Clinton's, Google people had the ability to influence people too. I think there are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of reasons why she lost. Because when you're talking about a margin that thin, many, many things can be responsible.
But you're not talking about, but Sam, when you do that, you're not talking about the process. The process, the American electoral process, is what has to remain sacrosanct, not the tactics that are used.
I think the voter suppression in Milwaukee probably had a lot more to do with how many Facebook fake news stories people got, to be honest with you. So
well, then include that in your statement about why she lost the election every time. And just for now, drop off that it. For now, drop off that that it couldn't have been, micro targeting of only 70,000 people up in the upper Midwest.
Yes,
I mean, come on, man.
You don't actually think that somebody sat down and said, we're going to target 70,000 people?
We personally kidnapped
It's not 70,000 people. No, it's the districts, you dummy. Come on. What are you talking about? It's the voter rolls.
Call you a dummy?
Get
this, come on, man. It's 3
right.
o'clock.
I got to go.
Come on.
But I get it.
Thanks.
I appreciate the call.
Love you guys.
Bill Buckner. I'm still haunted by that guy. Even though they've won all those World Series, I still get haunted by him. All right. 3 more IMs. Sorry, folks.
They threw a rock at your daughter, you prick.
He said your daughter. Why do you have to make it about my daughter?
She's on first base, and no one even saw it.
It's very convoluted.
And then the Russians came. They could have trotted jets and kidnapped voters right there. It was 70,000 people.
Your daughter's playing first base. Your son is playing second base. Okay? Your cousin is a shortstop. And then you don't know who the third baseman is. That's someone who's a friend who got brought to the game.
And, of course, leave it to you to be the only person to take an incoherent analogy and run with it.
Well, I was trying to figure out what he was saying.
A baseball
and I still
game that makes no sense. I'll do that too.
But I do think that if his point is saying that they had a plan and the rock being thrown at the first baseman threw the plan off, and the rock is illegal. You're not allowed to throw a rock at a first baseman. That's not how you play baseball. But I'm suggesting that there was also not just a rock being thrown at, but somebody else threw a bottle. Somebody else lit themselves on fire, and maybe one of their own teammates, had a heart attack at that time, and also she closed one eye. I mean, all of those things were why she dropped the ball.
And Matt has a lot of work to do, and I have an interview at 3:30 on another podcast. So
Sam,
for God's sake.
I have not heard exactly what is the so-called consensus of 17 agencies claim the Russians did. The leak Clinton emails were not a leak, not a hack. Times finally admitted it. It wasn't 17 agencies, but handpicked analysis in 4 agencies. It was 4 agencies, and the other 13 signed off, is what I understand. But yes, okay. Globalism bombs in Syria, nuclear escalation faces a good case. I can't. Angela Merkel, Michael should definitely wear more V-necks. Used to be melancholy.
Is that
Right,
Angela
Greg called it
Merkel?
Tom. Yeah. Tom Hartman's show yesterday. Greg wanted to defend libertarians. Hartman cut him off by reading the libertarian platform from one of the Koch brothers ran from office. It was
that's
pretty
a
funny.
good idea.
Brilliant.
Hartman would read a bullet point and then ask Greg if he agreed with it. It left Greg yelling, "You haven't let me make my point."
Wow, I didn't know Hartman had it in him. That's a genius.
Lauren, that caller was insufferable. Hey, I know you don't know much about the Alabama special election, but Mo Brooks will probably be the Republican nominee. And recently in a Fox interview, he promised to read the entire King James Bible in a filibuster if money for Trump's wall is not in the budget. Oh, my God. M. DeWitt, what are your thoughts on Peter Joseph's work, and how would you have him on the show? I don't know who that is, but send an email. All right, final IM of the day. I'm just going with Worcester Polyamorous because it's
funny.
a play on
somewhat.
Worcester Polytech, and that's it. Superior, Wisconsin is on Lake Superior, you idiots. The thing you learned from attending Simon Rock College. All right, folks. See you tomorrow, which is practically almost today.
Yeah.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get